You know,
He sounds like he's got a personality disorder. It sounds like as though he wants to, none of the
I
work
had
but all
some
of the glory.
unwelcome glimpses into his psyche because we used to spend a lot of time together. And I'm not an expert, but maybe you're right. But he's unique in his behaviour. I've never seen anything else like it. Because, of course, John joined when there was money there, and we weren't poor all the time. We weren't rich, but we didn't have to go and lie to the job centre, and we didn't have to, be poor. There was some cash there for us to live on. And John never did the playing to 8 people in Stoke and not the horrible stuff, but the stuff where you just think, well, that's the nature of it. We're here, so are 8 people. We'll do it anyway.
The Tuesday nights in front of virtually, I've played gigs where I've played in front of nobody except for bar staff, so I know exactly what you're saying. And they're the nights when you really earn they're the nights when you don't question the reason why you're doing what you're doing, but they really do make you appreciate even being able to play in front of 8 people. Those nights there. But you need them, don't you, unfortunately? I'm a working musician these days. I get paid to play. And look, we all love playing in front of the biggest crowds that we possibly can, but it's about a 50-50 split for me. But for you guys, playing in front of adoring fans and having somebody claiming credit for the wonderful work that you've done, I can completely understand why you wanted to exit a scenario like that. I mean, what else can you do?
I didn't exit. I was forced out. I didn't want to go. I had all this material for the next record. It was not on me in the end. An issue that arose that kicked it all off was irrelevant. I'm not even going to tell you. It was unpleasant. But whatever changed where me and Dan were no longer friends made it very, very difficult. And John had a hand in that with his bullshit, essentially. I'd love to be able to say something nice about him. As a person, he was all right. He wasn't a bad guy to hang out with. But, he's a funny one. Can you excuse me just for 2 seconds? I've got to go to the door. I'll be straight back.
You're right, no worries.
You there?
Definitely. Yeah, still here, mate.
Yeah, sorry about that. Unimaginative postman.
No, it's all good. No, that's all good. No, look, I really appreciate your candour and your frankness and sharing all of that. I can't imagine it'd be easy all these years later.
If it was about settling scores, I could have done that years ago. That's not what I'm doing. I feel sad that album never got made. Because in reality, unless something really changed, I was only doing that one more album then going anyway. And it was sad for me to think like that. I loved playing in that band. And, it's just... You could list 10 things that could have been done differently that might have changed it. But ultimately, I was pushed out, I was sacked, and Les was appalled at my treatment because he knew damn well it was me that was constantly working. So the whole thing is on John trying to achieve some status. So... Fuck him. I don't think he's ever tried to message me since. That was about 3 years ago.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
And in reality, he wasn't that crucial core of a band that he wanted to be. Whatever he contributed was very samey, and we used to spend a lot of time tweaking his parts. We didn't stop him writing. We wanted everyone to write. But it was the sandbagging, mate. Why would you do that? Even if you just accept he is a parasite and that band was his meal ticket, why would you try and change that? He got the best easy ride in the world.
I think some people get envious.
Songwriting with him.
But I think from my own experience, not just in bands, but I've just finished up a tenure as working for a large telecommunications company here called Telstra. And even whether you're in a band or in a corporate environment, if you've got a great idea, somebody's very envious because you've got that great idea, and it's not even that they didn't think up of it. They just don't want you to have a good idea. Sometimes it's as simple as that, and I think that's why I mentioned, that he may have had a personality disorder, because I've met plenty of these people over the years, and it just comes down to that sense of lack that they have. Really, I mean,
maybe
a good idea for him would have been to just take his spot in the back seat and just go along for the ride. Jesus, I'm a bass player. I know all about that.
Yeah. I didn't want him in a back seat. I wanted him to contribute because it gave us that much more power. But Yeah, it was his silly behaviour that caused most of that friction. And because he was saying one thing to one person and one thing to another, it just exacerbated the whole issue.
Mm.
And it's tragic because in a parallel universe, maybe that album got made. It would have been 1,000 times more powerful than Midian. I would have been totally comfortable doing a Clive Barker concept record because there were no lyrical themes on that record yet. They were totally open to interpretation. They're not. You couldn't listen to it and say that's a Cradle of Filth song. But if I played you the equivalent demos that went for Cruelty, you could see the connection. You could see how they'd grow. Because I didn't want to be the centre of something. I wanted to be on this mega team of everyone pulling at the same time.
Mm.
Well, and that was the thing.
Yeah, I had a discussion this morning with one of my newly minted bandmates, and he's the drummer, and it's his band along with the singer, both excellent musicians, and certainly got their heads screwed on the right way. But they've been sharing with me that they've been, and I've just been recruited into the band, that they've been having issues with guitarists, and look, I just said I've held my own band, I've chaired my own bands, and I've created bands and had relationships with agents and therefore the venues and the like, and it's bloody hard work. And I said to Gary even this morning, I said, look, it's probably best that it's yourself and the singer Kelly in the band that I'm in. And look, over time, I hope that I become a part of the Inner Sanctum, but I realise I've got to do some work to get there. But just have a coalition of the willing around you. It's very hard to have it even Stevens and to be not a fully democratic process, but a process where people contribute evenly. Now, we won't ever really have that problem because in the band that I'm a part of, we're playing covers music. But I can totally understand from the perspective that you think, well, more creative hands are going to produce better music or better quality music or certainly more music, that you'd want to take that attitude, particularly in a band like Cradle of Filth, where really it was very open-ended. I mean, especially on evidence that you did the Misfits cover on the From the Cradle to Enslave EP, you could almost have gone almost in a punky direction as well, couldn't you? So there was that full-blown bombastic symphonic edge. You know, you've alluded to the fact that there was that riff that Gian brought in that almost sounded like a Norwegian or a Scandinavian black metal opening. What was the second song? Well, no, it's the first proper song that's not an instrumental on Cruelty and the Beast. There are so many different directions that the band could have gone. And that's what I think I loved about Cradle of Filth now that I'm talking to you about it. You couldn't, sure, you got the whole black metal thing, but really you were just a great heavy metal band. And therefore, on that basis...
Well, that's how I understood it. It doesn't matter what colour it comes in. Heavy metal's like a cockroach, mate. As long as there's bored teenagers and cheap guitars, there will always be heavy metal of some kind. You know, you can stamp on that cockroach all you want. It just keeps coming back with a different name.
Yeah.
And that I get a kick out of it. It's not, there's no good new music for me to listen to. It's just, it's harder and harder to find. So, but yeah, the phrase you used, the coalition of the willing, what an excellent way of describing it. It never bothered me one bit if anybody else brought an idea in, because suddenly I could do something different because you're not building the foundation, you're interacting with people.
Mm.
You know, the song Mouth Through the Looking Glass, I didn't write any of the initial parts. What me and Nick did was get those initial parts and play them how we play them, and that's how that song runs. You know, I put the melodies on the slow part, but that was Rob's part that he brought in. And so, yeah. It's a funny time. I've always threatened to write a book because some of this stuff...
I think you need to, mate. Yeah, there's no...
Well, it sounds like bullshit when I say it out loud, but I promise you some of those things really happened. You know, all those bizarre stories that still come up, the being thrown out of the Vatican. The truth of that one will come out eventually.
Yeah.
You know, that was actually my fault, and I've never had the balls to tell the whole story, but one day, Andy.
Well, no, I'd encourage you to write a book because I think it'd be fascinating. You're articulate. You stand within your own truth on these matters, and you're an integral part of two very important albums. So, mate, yeah, I mean, look, it's these days you can self-publish. I mean, you know all this stuff. I'm not telling you anything you know, but you don't know. But you can self-publish, and mate, I think you'd have quite a readership out there, or maybe even. I
would prefer to get a writer to listen to me and Nick and Les, because of course Nick's there from the first album onwards. I turn up a year and a bit after that, and they were cool. You know, the sense of camaraderie Nick always brings up, making the Vampire EP, because none of us had anything. So we were all just poor in this unheated studio, getting on with it as best we could. We had no preconceptions. The guy who gets the production credit, he wasn't really a producer. We realised now he was an engineer, and he was at no point saying, "Well, how about and can we and this is how," and making it go forward like a guy like Kit or Mike Exeter would. And that it needs doing. It doesn't matter, because there was always that idea of everybody shares everything. I thought it would stay like that, where everybody would be comfortable with it and just muck in when they needed to. You know, I'm a terrible keyboard player, but if somebody needs to play some extra keyboards and I'm the person that's there to do it, I'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah, you just do what you do what you got to do to get the job done. Yeah. No, I can understand that. Yeah.
I always guessed people like you didn't give a fuck how it happened. You just wanted it to happen, to have your next record that you wanted. And because as a metal fan, that's what I want. I wanted that next album for my favourite band. That, like Iron Maiden, they was on a sort of 18-month turnaround. And you knew there was a new record coming before it was announced. You start getting excited and get your hopes up for it. And Maiden especially, they would normally cash them in beautifully for me. You would always get the records you wanted back when I was a teenager. And because I took them on, they were like one of my first metal bands. My older sister had a copy of the first album that she gave me when I first got a record player. But the first one that was released as a fan was Somewhere in Time when I was about 12.
That's my favourite album of
theirs.
I was very lucky.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah,
I got to see them on that tour. It was great. And I watched them every tour till Bailey. That's not a criticism of him. I used to go and watch Wolfsbane. They were great. I really like his solo stuff that he's done after Iron Maiden, but as the frontman for Iron Maiden, it just didn't do it for me.
Totally agree. I don't know what happened there at all, and I think a lot of people would love to get the full story on that one there, because Steve Harris, that is, sorry for anybody listening, has never really come out and explained his decision, what with the volume of excellent singers that were available and certainly would have no doubt wanted to join Maiden. I think in Wolfsbane, Blaze was pretty good. I think he's very good in his solo material. I think he gets it completely right, but I have no idea what Steve was thinking, particularly when it came down to Virtual 11. I'd almost describe that album as unlistenable. It just sounds like a cardboard cutout copy of the wonderful
Is that
Maiden.
the one with Falling Down was the lead single?
No, that's the X Factor, which I thought was okay. I could give him that. But a lot of people like to blame Yannick for the way Maiden sound through the 90s. And I think a lot of the best songs were written through the 90s by Yannick. I think if Yannick wasn't in the band, my God, I don't know how
He's a great guitar player. Great guitar player. Do you ever hear the new wave band he was in, White Spirit?
No, I haven't.
Just by freak chance, this is Yannick Gers when he was probably like 19 or 20. He was a great guitar player back then, and it's that same vibe he's got. They're not my favourite records, the Bailey ones, but when he contributes, he's a great guitar player. You know, I probably couldn't pick one of the Iron Maiden guitar players that was my favourite. It was the whole thing that was Iron Maiden was what I enjoyed.
That really interests me, because I had you pegged as an Adrian Smith guy, because in my view...
At a push, yes.
Yeah, in my view...
What made me want to play guitar was the solo from Prowler.
Oh, well, that's Dave, isn't it?
Which I believe is Dave Murray.
Dave Murray, yeah, I'm pretty sure that one is. But in my view, Adrian symbolically handed the torch to your good self through the 90s. So when Maiden started checking out the 90s, Cradle stepped up, and you in particular took that torch from Adrian, because I can hear a lot of Adrians in your playing.
The high praise keeps on coming. I couldn't have asked for a nicer thing for anybody to have said about me. I've always loved the melody that you had. You know, the lead in Stranger in a Strange Land.
Yeah, totally.
How beautiful. How utterly beautiful. But my favourite Maiden records are the first one, because it was my first Maiden album. But I love Seventh Son. There was something about that record. You know, the way it holds together.
Yeah,
there's no flab on it. The instrumental break in the title track is exemplary. You want to understand why metal is great. Listen to that tune. And if you can get, you know, even the people who can't get past how it was kind of prog for Maiden, wasn't it? It was much less direct, much more.
Yeah, it was hear like much more thoughtful.
A Uriah Heep thing and a Deep Purple thing happening in there. But that instrumental break in the center of that is so powerful. I played it to my son when he started listening to music, and his mouth was just open. He'd never heard anything like it, and he'd heard Maiden before. But yeah, the raw power of that band, and probably Adrian Smith, if I had to pick a favourite, because of those melodies. I can remember having a VHS tape of the promo of Stranger in a Strange Land and pausing it to try and see how you played that beautiful melodic break in the center.
I did the same thing, yeah. I know exactly what you're saying.
I was probably in my 20s by the time I nailed it.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm a guitar geek. It's one of those things. I don't mind saying that I used to sit there and play over all my favourite stuff and try and work out how it was done.
Well, I can hear a lot of that phrasing. Yeah, I think it's come through big time then, because I can hear a lot of that phrasing. So if I'm significantly influenced by you as a guitarist, and I can hear, and then it was just one of those random things. I remember being into Maiden before, of course, Cradle, because they've been around a lot longer, and I remember really being into Adrian's playing, and then hearing yours and thinking, shit, it's almost the same thing. It's just coming from the same school, but of course it's this X-rated version of new wave of British heavy metal that Cradle were doing.
That's a great way of saying it. To be fair, you'd have to add Glenn Tipton in, because I can see Glenn Tipton then Adrian Smith. I can hear that as well. Priest solos, I think, contributed to what Adrian Smith was doing as much as Adrian Smith contributed to what happened after him. One of my all-time favourite leads is from Turbo Lover. It's not very scary technical guitar playing, but the melody just goes straight in, and it is really aggressive as well. I know that's a sort of, I'll get thrown out of the Priest Fans Alliance for saying that I like the Turbo album. I think it's one of their strongest songs, weird production or none.
I think people are coming around to that album now, though. Yeah.
Oh, I've threatened to cover it a couple of times, but I haven't got the voice for it.
I don't think Rob has either.
Live. Well, all those guys. My favourite guitar players. First song I could play all the way through was "Holiday in Cambodia," followed by Iron Man. Every guitar player is a sum of those early influences.
Isn't that interesting?
Because adding to it.
Because East Bay Ray was one of my primary influences as well. Him and Mantis were, I love the way he plays guitar. On one of the first songs I ever heard where I went, that's the guitar playing that I wanted to play like, was Chicken Conformist off Bedtime for Democracy.
Yeah, it's great. I always love the intro to Police Truck.
Nice, yeah.
Nice, there's a sort of eerie, sinister quality to his guitar playing, where
he's a good guitarist.
So I'll go, that's like an up new wave sort of vibe.
Yeah,
and then you hear it again, and you think, fucking hell, it's really, really creepy what he's doing. And like the octaves at the beginning of Holiday in Cambodia, I just stumbled on how he made that sound and caned it over and over again until I could play the tune. I used to cover it with my friends when I was young. It's but it all goes in and it all stays, but it's always melody for me.
It is,
really frightening guitar playing. When I was young, I used to practice all the time. I was so much faster when I was 19 than I am now. But it's because I've adjusted what I want to achieve. I don't want a little gold star for being the fastest. I want somebody to whistle it on the way home.
Yeah. And what about some of I'm being a bass player, I'm a massive fan of Mark King and Level 42. Did you get into any bands like Level 42, Psychedelic Furs?
I can't see the joint, but Psychedelic Furs, I always loved that tune, Pretty in Pink. I've never heard anything else by them. But that's it's one of those songs, there's a time and a place that used to get played. Being from a small town, there wasn't a rock pub and a punk pub and a reggae pub. There was just one big place where they played all that music over the PA on a busy night. And so I remember Pretty in Pink, and it just reminds me of hanging out with my friends down by the ocean, like we always did.
Well, I love Psychedelic Furs. In all honesty, they played a gig up where I'm from in Queensland, Coolangatta, in 2006 to about 30 people, and it's probably one of the best gigs I've ever seen. Actually, it was Richard the Butler Brothers were playing, but they had a very good lineup then, and Jesus, they put in a great show. But the question I wanted to ask you is, I've also, and do check this out, there's a guitarist called Boone Gould who was the early guitarist, or the guitarist through the 80s in Level 42. I find a lot of your guitar playing sounds similar to his as well. Now, completely different genres and the like, but I'm hearing
I'll check it out. I've always had a bit of an aversion to Level 42, not because of the band or their music, but because, and you might even know this guy's name, one of my contemporaries who's from the same part of the world as me is like the world's leading expert on Mark King. And genuinely, when we were teenagers, you could say to him, if you mentioned Mark King or Level 42 in the next 20 minutes, he would slam your head in the door. He would say, but Level 42, he's called Stuart Clayton, and he knows everything about that style. He's written books about Mark King's playing. It's fantastic what that guy can do. But I've always joked with the bass players that I work with, if I see your thumb over that pickup, you are fired. That's not metal bass playing. I want you on the kick drums, and I want you to, all the space in between is yours, but you put your bass note on the kick drum, everything else I'll leave to you.
Yeah.
But I will check it out. I mean, that's an interesting parallel.
Yeah,
because the things I listened to when I was growing up that weren't metal was, I've always been like a secret electro pop fan from the early 80s, because that was like in Britain, more of a punk movement. Suddenly, people could afford synthesizers that couldn't play keyboards. They weren't the dude from the LP. They were just like hitting stuff. And so early Human League, I really got into Fad Gadget and all the punk tunes like the Ruts that we used to hear down the pub. Where as much as I loved Iron Maiden, the degree of energy, that tune Babylon's Burning, again, when I hear that, I'm right back at that weird bar with the open back facing out over the sea with no fence between us and the cliff. It's surprising most of us are still here.
Jesus,
and I mean, it was one of those things. All music goes in. I'm forever saying this to my peers and my students. You can't pick your influences, because if you say, one of my students said, I hate Coldplay. Well, Coldplay now influence you in a negative way. There are negative influences. So I guess Level 42 might be a negative influence on me because Stuart never stopping talking about them. And the Smiths, I was like a closet Smiths fan. I always felt weird talking to my metal
Johnny
mates,
Marr,
saying, actually, the beginning of Meat is Murder is more disturbing than a lot of death metal records.
Yes, yeah. Well, Johnny Marr was the guitarist, wasn't he? He's gone on to have a tremendous solo career.
It wasn't the guitars, it was Morrissey. His lyrics I find really engaging, and I actually think he did his best work as a solo artist. So no, don't tell the Smiths fans where I live and bricks through my window.
I tend to. We have very similar views, I think, on things, and I tend to agree with you on that. I think the Smiths had one good record, but it was, you could tell there was a lot of drugs and debauchery going on at the time, and I think he sort of straightened himself out and started to produce more coherent music as a solo artist.
Yeah. No, one of the most beautiful lyrics I've ever heard is Morrissey. I couldn't tell you the name of the song. I do have it in my iPod somewhere. And he says, you've never been in love until you've seen the sunrise behind the school for the blind. And that's a picture right there. And it's a unique one. That's him. He's not talking to us in common metaphors. He's just telling his listener. He's quite conversational, his style. It's like he's talking to you, some of his lyrics. And, that level of beauty just engaged me. I have a great friend who used to hang out in the same bar as me. He was as goth as I was metal. And we learned to listen to each other's music. So he gave me Killing Joke and Sisters of Mercy and Bauhaus and bands like that. And I got him listening to Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden and Slayer. And, it's a great way to be. Segregation of music is a bad thing. There are too many little genres now, not enough crossing over.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you mentioned in Bauhaus, I'm so glad you do mention them because I love especially Peter Murphy's solo stuff. Would you say that had an impact on you musically, or was it more of an aesthetic?
Oh, no, it's the music. It's, back then it was more you experience the album cover as you pick it up from your friend's collection and put it on. But Bella Lugosi's Dead is a great tune. And I loved the guitars on it because they were like Killing Joke. They were like Metal Through the Looking Glass. They were going to be the next band I was going to mention. Guys. Yeah. Oh, Killing Joke were a bigger thing for me. The guitar playing on Killing Joke went right in. Discharge, that was another band that I used to play down at that bar. And still listen to Discharge now. And, I definitely take influence from what that guy did. Bones was his name.
I think so, yeah. I didn't quite get into Discharge. Yeah, all I remember them for was the glam album, like the LA Gun style album they came out with in 1985 or 86. Not that I wasn't old enough to remember. I was too young back then, but I read quite a bit about that.
I've never heard it. They were records that you could pick up in the second-hand store. And I think I saw a shot of maybe Metallica or Slayer wearing a Discharge shirt. And so for £1, I could take home a copy of Hear Nothing, See Nothing. And it hit me very hard, that one, because I'm not a metal fundamentalist. I don't think it all has to come from Black Sabbath and Deep Purple to begin with. It's, like I was saying, it's this cockroach thing, bored teenagers doing things too loud. That's where that sound comes from. And so, there was a lot of different music went in. We're so far away from the city. We had our own local heroes, like a punk band that some people have heard of. I met people around the world who knew this because I used to wear a little Cult Maniacs pin on my jacket when I was touring.
Right.
They were a big thing for me. I still, they were never huge, but they had an impact on the guys round here because they were so fucking noisy. They were so out of order. They were just, in the conservative days of the 1980s, the Cult Maniacs and later the Vibe Tribe were crucial for me to see how little they gave a fuck of what anybody thought of them. And they did it anyway.
Yeah.
So, it all goes in. Even just having the radio on, stuff will go in. So it's hard to pick out influences. We all have our favourites, but probably if you kept pulling out bands, I could probably say, I love the guitar playing on X, whatever it is. And it's quite easy for me to pull out things that I hated about guitar playing. When I was young, I hated the Eagles. I had to learn to appreciate the Eagles fairly recently.
I had to, when I first started getting guitar and bass lessons back in the early 90s, I had a guitar teacher who was obsessed with the Eagles, so guess what I had to learn? And I hated them too. A bad experience of the Eagles, like Hotel California, right? That's like, it's in my top 10 things I prefer never to hear again. But, tunes like Take It to the Limit, if you're a songwriter, you just go, how fucking clever is that?
That sounds like a basic country tune. It's actually really happening at a musical level as well.
Well, I think One of These Nights, I think now is one of the best songs ever written because of the moving, grooving bass line that he put underneath it and the wonderful vocal cadence that he's got. Who was that? Glenn who sang that one? It was one of the two of them.
I'm not an expert, mate. I'm just an end user of the Eagles.
Likewise, but I actually saw them. Thank God I did. Actually, I did see them when they came to Brisbane, and they were pretty good. They weren't too bad actually, and I'm glad I did because it was only a matter of a few months later that Glenn passed away.
Yeah,
so that's
it's one of those bands where there's a few times I thought I'll go and see them next time, like Queen. I'll go and see the next tour. And of course, never got to see it. It would have been interesting.
Oh God,
because I think talking about it now, the Eagles used the same tools as some of the metal bands, the lovely harmony guitars they were famous for. But what it didn't do was go right through you like an ice pick, like some of the harmony breaks Iron Maiden would pull together. And I think it was a sense of disappointment. I was hearing that recognisable sound, but not understanding that they weren't trying to scare the piss out of the first 10 rows with their evil metal. They were doing something different. It was more inclusive, less confrontational than a heavy metal sound. But I have my students to thank for this, doing deep studies of the Eagles and the Beatles and all the stuff I didn't get when I was young. Some of it stays I don't get. But, I understand why the Beatles were a big thing for people of that era. And the big one, of course, one of my students who sadly passed away this year, huge Fleetwood Mac fan. I had no idea Fleetwood Mac had a life before that self-satisfied cocaine-induced ALR stuff that was on the radio when I was growing up. Peter Green is now one of my favourite guitar players.
Well, I was going to say...
and so beautiful when he plays and so angry when he goes that way.
Well, it's Lindsey Buckingham's one of the best guitarists I've ever seen live, actually.
Funny, he's a great player. I appreciate them now. And it's through my students, again, having to learn, what is that guitar line that comes up every few years? There's one that's really involved. Has Big Love got like a frighteningly fast fingerpick intro?
Yeah, I know the one you're talking. I'm not that big. I make a point of seeing these bands when they come through town because they're all dying, and I think, well, if I don't go and see them now, and to that point, I've just missed out on bloody Paul McCartney tickets. The stupid ticketing system didn't quite work, so I missed out on that. So either they're going to do another release, or I'll miss out. And they're playing the Suncorp Stadium, which is our major football stadium here. But I think I've missed out on that, which is a shame because I can only imagine that Paul imbibed as much of the illicit substance types that his contemporaries did. And I've noticed with Messrs. Bowie and Kilmister that you tend to get into your 60s if you've been doing those things through your 20s and 30s, and that's when that's when your heart sort of goes, all of that stuff you did 30 years ago, no good whatsoever.
No. So even David Bowie is something I grew up with because my sister loved David Bowie. But she was very much about contemporary music being fashionable. And so her cast-off Bowie albums, I was always 3 or 4 years behind. I used to love songs like Ashes to Ashes. I still listen to that one regularly, the Ziggy Stardust album. He's one of those... He was doing his own thing with a degree of authority that most people will never match. And I don't think he'd go to shit what anybody thought.
No,
he was never playing to the crowd, that guy.
He was, I spoke to Glenn Hughes recently, who's just a legend. You obviously know Glenn Hughes is a wonderful bloke.
He's a friend of a friend. I've never heard anything bad about Glenn, and apparently has some of the most hilarious stories in the world.
He does. And, the short story that he shared with me was a David Bowie story, and it was about Bowie coming into his house and going, Glenn, no, you've got to throw out all of these clothes and you've got to start all over again and reinvent yourself. That's what you've got to do. And I think that was at a time when Glenn probably needed some good friends around him by his own admission, as he said to me on the phone that he doesn't remember the 80s. It's not the 60s he doesn't remember, it's the 80s that he doesn't remember. And I think that's the period where his friendship blossomed with David. I'm just imagining that's the case there, not saying it was like that. But, David's very special to me, actually, because we, when my wife and I got married, the bridal waltz was As the World Falls Down from the movie Labyrinth. Oh, yeah. And
it's funny, I collaborated on a version of a Labyrinth song with a guy from Australia recently.
Oh, what song was that?
Within You.
Yeah, gosh, that's great. Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, he just came out of nowhere with it. And I just rebuilt my studio. That was the first chance that I had to rag out all the new equipment. Whether it has a future as a project, I don't know. He keeps threatening me with some original music to put around it. But it was an interesting one. Again, it's like when you're learning songs as a guitar teacher, you see them on a sort of, for want of a better word, forensic level. And you can kind of see the fingerprint of the songwriter. And I've never looked it up. I suspect that's Bowie writing with somebody else. It's a very, very strange song. Or even if it was written to picture, because it's the dramatic scene with the impossible stairways, isn't it?
Yeah, the stairways.
I never saw the movie once. My little sister loved it. And so I think I watched it on VHS with her when we were kids, and that was my one contact. But this guy that I was chatting to, same as yourself, went to one of the shows in Australia and decided to contact me. He's an excellent singer. Right. And I wish I could tell you the name of the band he was in, because apparently they did tour Australia and they had some movement going on.
So it's not metal music he's playing. He's playing more...
Oh, no, it's metal. And it's a metal version of Within You that he requested.
Okay. Well, I might look that up.
Because what fascinated him was what I would do with the string harmonies on the guitar. Because I said, well, if you want the keyboard thing that they've got on the original, you can't ask me to do that. I'm not good enough with keyboards to perform it. And he said, no, I want you to tackle it with guitars. And so I just went at it, and he was thrilled. But it wasn't finished, because it's like a 2-minute song. And so I asked him to build around it, start writing again, and get him out of his retirement. Same as all of us, we have families now, and so you can't get up at 6 a.m., work until 9, back to bed, and then do your little writing bursts like I used to. It's kind of not formalised, but I do a couple of hours, 6 days a week, pretty much. And so I'm just waiting on him, actually. It'll be really exciting when I get to hear the rest of it, because it will put it in a context.
It's a band called Rose Scythe?
No. They had a sort of generic black metal name. They were generic black metal. But I remember meeting this guy and chatting to him at the Melbourne show. And our lives are similar enough. We always have plenty to chat about, and so we're mates now. But I welcome any collaboration. It's very few people ever ask me to join in with things, because guitar players grow on trees. You know, there's thousands of them. And, of course, like the joke goes, how many guitar players does it take to change a light bulb?
99, except one, but 99 to stand there and point and say, I could have done that.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
There are a million guitar players. And so it's always a pleasure to be asked. Like a German Gothic rock band asked me to contribute to their record that I was really surprised by. That, again, turned out to be a guy that I met touring Germany many years ago. Haven't heard the album yet, so I threw him some guitars. Apparently they made the cut and they're on there. And then there's lots of early days projects that I'm on at the moment. Like, Nineprints is ongoing. I've started writing the second album. We have an EP and an album recorded. But the overwhelming disinterest of labels means it's slowed down, because I'm going to release it myself.
Do it yourself.
It's good music and it deserves to come out, because it's a different thing than anything else I've ever done, not just because I'm singing, but because of me and Rob, the drummer, Rob Van Hughes, who is excellent in the same way as Barker is excellent, and the same way that Adrian is excellent. The difference would be, Adrian, we didn't have a sympathetic thing. We had to verbally communicate a lot more, where the bass player in Nineprints every now and then just says, it's like listening to binary when you two start, and we'll bash back and forth in some sort of weird code, and it manifests as music, and I love playing like that. It's a different thing. And it's not a solo record. Somebody asked me, is it a solo? It's absolutely not a solo record. That is a band. In fact, I'm not afraid to say the heaviest tune, the best riff on there, all I did was write the vocal line. That was the rhythm section, came up with everything else, and I loved it. It's great to be in that position, but there's a possible return to black metal, see if that works out. An old friend of mine wants to put something like that together, who's very, very good drummer, who you've heard, but I'm not dropping names until it looks like it might happen.
Sure.
Not Barker, sadly. But you'll know the guy's name if it turns up. I do production work I want to get back into doing. There's a great band that play with Nineprints a lot called Graviton, which is my best ever students band. And I'm looking they're coming into the studio in the very near future. There is stuff, but it's all so early on. I want to say I'm doing this brilliant thing because it's starting to happen, but it has to be not a commercial product. I listen to albums and I want to make albums. The modern let's do a single thing, which of course is the same as the 1950s. It's nothing new at all. Doesn't appeal to me. I want to make a complete piece of work. And if you want to just play one song, you play it.
Well, I think your creativity
flows.
Yeah, your creativity lends itself to a unit or a body of work rather than a once-off. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I've said no to lots of people to do a guest guitar solo, but I would always be up for collaborating with people on work, or somebody like that dude from Melbourne. Just he gave me loads of adjectives like this and like this, but this song, and I just fired an arrangement together and did it, and we're still friends. So I must have done something right. Working with, and especially now with Dropbox, my excellent sidekick, I can be anywhere. And collaborate with anybody. where the audio files are universal now, and it's getting easier and easier to do it.
What do you use to record? Like you're using Pro Tools? You got a Pro Tools rig set up, or you use Logic?
I've never liked Pro Tools, actually. I've always found not always. Years ago, Pro Tools interface was very, very clunky. And because I was comfortable with Logic, I'm sure Logic will talk to TDM hardware.
Yep.
And so I got into Logic, and that's still what I use. Our album was done partially in a studio not far from here because they have the wickedest sounding drum room. Recorded the guitars and the drums there. Everything else was done back at my little workspace. So it was a Mac with Logic. It was in fact a G4, which I'd had since 2001. And that was its last job, was finish the 9-pence album, and then he can retire, and I'll replace you with something that, basically towards the end of the mix, it was working so hard. I thought one day I'm going to hit that little button and it won't go bong, and I'll have to extract all the information from the external drives and be forced to change. So that was its last job, was doing the 9-pence album. Everything else we've done is on my new Mac. So Logic for me. I keep meaning to get back into Pro Tools, but like I say, the interchange of files. This Black Metal project will be one guy working on Windows with Pro Tools, with me, with my Mac, and with Logic. And as long as we stay on the same page, because he's a really good engineer as well, then the files will just fly up and down the country until something happens and it's worth us meeting up.
Yep.
But we realised chatting, we've been friends for 20 years and never actually played together, so now must be the time. But that will be, in his words, a barbaric, old-time black metal sound, so I'm not sure where he's going with it. I'm going to let him drive for a little while and wait for my files to come through.
I would love to see you do the full-blown new wave of British heavy metal hog. I would love to hear a full album of just you, just, as Jamie Justice says, just letting it fly, just bang out there, full-on Adrian Smith style lead breaks. I'm hearing a lot of it out there at the moment, but again...
Oh, yeah, there's a lot, but a lot of it is... As a fan of that music, not from the time, but as a secondhand record buyer, like Trespass, Venom, what are the wackier ones? Elixir. Always loved Elixir's first album, stuff like that. I'd love to do it, but I'd want to do it in a context with other people who are as enthusiastic and familiar with the music as I am, so that we can just be dorks for a week and go and play in this mode. Let's all sound like Angel Witch for 10 minutes and see what happens. That kind of thing. But maybe I'd love to do something like that. I'd love to get back into doing twin lead guitars. And to take it back to what I was saying, honestly, I haven't done twin guitars since having to deal with John. It just sort of poisoned the well. It's about time I sorted myself out and found someone to play with.
Well, I'd love to hear that. You remind me a little bit of Ralph Santola, the excellent guitarist that was in Deicide, Obituary, Sebastian Bach's band. He's a Floridian bloke.
Never met him. Know his name. I used to see the Deicide guys around at festivals.
Yeah, well,
I think that was before his time.
When you guys were playing Cradle of Filth, definitely. The Hoffman brothers.
Those guys were crazy.
Death metal's answer to Kerry King and Jeff Hanneman. Yeah.
When we met them at festivals, me and Nick used to stand next to them because we looked like we weren't wasted then. They were out of control completely. I won't even get into it. The stories are out there, I'm sure.
Yeah,
but they were wild.
I was always into Deicide. I do love death metal, and I've always been a big fan of Deicide's work. But I got to tell you, when the Hoffman brothers left, I thought, oh God, here we go. Who are they going to get in? And then they got in Ralph Santola, and the career-defining album for Deicide, I believe, is the first album that he appeared on, which was you might have heard it, but The Stench of Redemption. The guitar solos on that.
I lost Deicide somewhere around Once Upon a Cross, I think.
Well,
I was never a huge fan. They were one of those bands that my mates were into and I'd hear. But if I wanted Florida death metal, and another favourite album from my youth is Scream Bloody Gore and Slowly We Rot, like sort of equal favourites of that style. I know they're very different. But as a Celtic Frost fan, it was quite gratifying realising that Obituary were the next thing on.
Well, that's what they were.
Slow, grinding ugliness that they could produce.
No blast beats for John. Is it John Tardy or Donald Tardy, the drummer? Yeah, that was his major claim to fame, I think. And the band's all the better for it. Actually, I do quite like Obituary, and they're a band that I find that I can put on. And this might make you laugh, but I put them on around my kids quite a bit because they like to. We do this little circle pit thing around the living room, and
cool.
we do the albums that Ralph appeared on, because I've spoken to Ralph a couple of times as well, interview and over Facebook and the like, and I do love the albums that he appeared on with Obituary, so I do put that on. And the other album that I quite like putting on is the album that everybody seems to hate is the Morbid Angel record, Illud Divinum Insanus. I don't know whether you heard that one, but that's a very big departure for them.
Oh, whatever starts with E, because they're alphabetized, aren't they, Morbid Angel Records?
Yeah,
I love Domination. I was there from their first album, really liked Altars of Madness. They lost me a little bit on Blessed of the Sick. Covenant was going my way. I really liked that one. But Domination, I think they just peaked out there. And whatever the album, Entangled in Chaos, it's a live album, isn't it?
That's right.
And then Formula Fatal to the Flesh.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you know it.
Yeah, they didn't do it for me. I wanted to hear where they were going after Domination. I didn't want them to take a step back. And around that time, I was lucky enough to chat to Trey. And what he was telling me was exciting. What happened wasn't what he had in his head. And maybe eventually it comes around and he finally I won't tell you what he said, but it would have been a radical departure for Morbid Angel. And it would have been exciting to hear because you got Sandoval playing the drums. You know, that is... Lots of drummers I know don't like him. I think he's exceptional. It's that brutality that he brings to whatever he does.
Well,
particularly on Domination.
He's the one drummer that inspires drum envy, really. I mean, I couldn't agree more with you. He's an exceptional drummer. I think he and Barker's very good, but with all due respect to Nick, Sandoval is just something else altogether. But I was speaking to...
I think Nick would agree with you, mate. When you catch up with him when he comes to Australia, I'm sure he would tip a hat to Pete Sandoval. But I don't think he's better than Barker. I think Barker is different. He's because sometimes Nick would try and emulate those incredible kick drums, and he got it very close. But Nick's innate style is kind of like mine. It's embedded in 80s heavy metal. We're unreconstructed metal kids from provincial Britain.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Gosh, I won't press you on it, but I'd love to hear what Trey said to you, because I did a 2-hour profile of Trey's guitar playing. There's a couple of guitarists that I really am inspired by. You're one of them, Trey. Ralph Santola in metal, you're the three.
Wow.
You know, in terms of, and of course I'll add Adrian Smith to that mix there, but I did a 2-hour profile, the same radio show that I host that you will appear on, our discussion here will appear on. I did a 2-hour dissection, if you like, breaking down how Trey not so much approached albums, but the evolution of Trey Exagtov. And you don't so much hear a change in his style as you hear a change in the production with Trey. His style actually hasn't changed much from the album that was the demo album. I think it was called
totally agree.
Abominations of Desolation, I think it was called, the one that had Mike Browning from Nocturnus instead of David Vincent on it, which is a very primitive and raw sounding album. But
there's something going on there, though, isn't there? It's got a thing. I heard that long after I heard Altars of Madness, but it was... there's something about that band, and it's presumably that's Trey's songwriting. That's why I love Domination. They are songs where Covenant, especially, right up until you get to Namataru and God of Emptiness, right at the end, there are some amazing riffs on there.
Oh, it's
incredible. One of those records where it engages you, but it doesn't leave you with anything too much, and that's where Domination got me. Songs like it's the one Barker used to play constantly. He actually jammed the CD in a CD player in our tour bus, and you had to listen to it forever.
Right,
there was a double disc changer. He jammed Apocalyptic Raids and Domination by Morbid Angel.
Oh, Hellhammer, Apocalyptic Raids, yeah.
Yeah. And so I know those very, very well. It's called Where the Slime Live, that tune that he always used to it would send Barker giddy, just the technical stuff that was going on in the drums. But it was the song that went with it. They were songs in the sense that you recognise with Iron Maiden. They were cool back then. I was lucky enough to see Morbid Angel a few times, and they changed really dramatically. Not in the sound, but I suppose the clarity. Seeing them the first time for the Altars of Madness tour was just, it's like being put in a metal bin and hit with sticks for 40 minutes. It was amazing. Yeah. Didn't know what had hit me. Just couldn't take it in. By the time I saw them on their Domination tour, which is actually when I got to meet Trey, Nick introduced me. He knew them from somewhere. And the clarity was incredible. And they've got a strange stage presence as well. They're very like Slayer. They just kind of get on with it as though nobody's there. There's not a lot of crowd interaction. There's none of what I call Wayne's Welding. They all join in, everybody singing sort of shit. Yeah. But they were so engaging. It was one of is it the best death metal show I've ever seen? Could be. I mean, you have to count Obituary with that, because every Obituary show I've seen has been
very good. They're the one band. They've toured here a couple of times, but they're the one band I've missed out on seeing, and I'm bloody kicking myself for missing them with Ralph. You know, but the tray, I think I've distilled tray down to an essence. It might not be the definitive, if you like, summary of Trey's playing, but what I think he is Eddie Van Halen thrown through a Jimi Hendrix blender in a death metal style. Now that to me makes sense.
I can see that. The Van Halen thing, yes, absolutely. Because Van Halen, you know, as a musician, I'm sure you appreciate that's a unique style he has. There is something...
Oh, it's unimitable. You can't
essentially
imitate it. Yeah.
Van Halen about it. You know, just to go against the grain again, I love his playing on 5150. He's so aggressive on that. There's another one of those records, Change of Frontman, rejuvenates the band. Never liked any of the other Hagar records, but 5150, what is that tune? The Trans Trem one, Get Up. I have tried to play that a few times, and I even borrowed a Trans Trem guitar to do it. And to nail it how he has it is incredibly hard. But yeah, I can see that because Trey's got that sort of train of thought thing going on, especially in his lead guitars, where I think evidently they are planned, but they never sound rigid.
It sounds like as though he's winging it, like as though he's going perilously close to losing control of what he's trying to do, but then he just brings it back. And I don't know how he does it. He's just in touch with something else. Maybe, you know, he goes on with all of that H.P. Lovecraft stuff, which I don't really understand, to be honest. You know, all the ancient Sumerian, that's all part of H.P. Lovecraft's imagination.
I'm a huge Lovecraft fan. Well, you discovered it when I was a kid.
Well, you know what I'm talking about then, but Trey, I think Trey takes it deadly seriously. He thinks it's like something that is real. It's not fiction. And... I spent maybe half an hour talking to him, and he's an unusual character. I couldn't say I knew the guy, but we did have an interesting chat about guitar playing, essentially, which is how he got onto his plan for the future. And maybe. But reality is a funny thing, mate. It bends and never breaks, but it will bend for you. You know, we all everything is perception. It really is. It is.
I had my life changed by my brother-in-law allowing me access to his library. And there were like 1,500 books there, and he just started picking out Sartre, and what a great pile of books. Jean-Paul Sartre, forget the one, it's the copy I have still is the two negative faces facing into each other. And Carlos Castaneda, the first of the Don Juan books, in the same pile of books. And they stayed with me forever, those things. So... maybe I'm not quite as straight up the reality as some people think. So
Sartre is one of those existentialists, isn't he? Where, you know, questioning what's reality.
I wouldn't even pretend to understand it. Absolutely, yeah. Oh, and Descartes. He gave me Descartes. This is how we got talking.
Oh, yeah.
Was in a strange roundabout way. We watched that movie Dark Star, and he remarked that do you know the movie, the John Carpenter one?
Yeah,
The Living Bomb.
Yep.
He talked about the finale. He's a big film buff, this guy, in terms of Cartesian logic. And that's why they arrive at, I think therefore I am, and so he triggers himself. And that's why he let me into his library to just start raiding his books. So, Lovecraft was before that, but I have Rick to thank for some of the really strange things I've read over the years. But yeah, I mean, I think to some extent you're free to have your own reality. You know, if you turn the TV on, just to sound like some deranged old hippie now, somebody is inflicting a reality on you via the news. You know, the world is a fucking joyous place and a horrible place at the same time. But the news would have it that it's a deeply, deeply unpleasant place at every turn. And the way it tells you how to feel about events bothers me greatly. I don't have broadcast TV in my house. My children watch Amazon or something like that to get the kids' shows.
Yep.
And I watch almost no TV that was made recently. I'm a big fan of old horror movies, old science fiction movies, Doctor Who geek, that sort of thing. So, having the streaming means we get to choose. And it was adverts, ultimately. My son, same as me, has Asperger's, which you're not supposed to say anymore. We have autistic spectrum conditions. And when he was very young, adverts baffled him because we had to explain that when you're out shopping with your mother, that powder doesn't get it whiter than that powder. They just told you that on TV. And so we made the decision just to switch the broadcast TV off.
Okay.
So my reality is different because I have Asperger's. I struggle with facial expressions. So I'm much more capable of speaking to you sensibly on the phone because I'm not constantly misreading your face. However, what I miss out on there, my bizarre memory I get in return. I was in my 30s before I accepted that my memory works in a strange way, the way that I can recall strings is how I think of it. Like you nudged me about the show in Sydney. and then I could see the venue, and then I could remember what happened the whole day.
Yeah, you've remembered that clear as day. When I spoke to Danny, I don't think he remembered it at all. I think he remembered. I had to actually remind him, but he only jogged his memory that he even toured Australia in 1997.
Yeah. Oh, it was a busy time. He had as much jet lag as I did. We were all a little bit spaced out because we were in Japan just before that, which is also great shows, especially Osaka. That was one of the best shows ever, and strangest. There was a couple of girls in the front row who'd made finger puppets of all the members of Cradle of Filth, and they were dancing in front. They were right in front of me during the show, and they had their hands up with 3 puppets each dancing along.
God bless
during
the Japanese.
Shows.
Yeah, I love the Japanese. Yeah,
the
new metal
culture
band
shock
I
was massive.
The band I was in actually had a Japanese frontman, and the things he'd come up with after 5 beers were just the funniest things. He'd have us in stitches. We'd go to a Chinese restaurant here at South Bank in Brisbane, and wherever we'd go to a restaurant, and after 5 beers, the things that he would tell us. And I wasn't sure whether something got lost in translation, but no, what is completely batshit mental to my mate Matthew, who's still a very good friend of mine, was completely batshit mental to us, was completely normal to him. He'd have us in hysterics. So, yeah, that doesn't surprise me in the least that you had a great time there.
Yeah. Well, everybody was so welcoming, and lots of weird stuff happened. Ask Les about visiting the English pub. I won't tell that story, and he can't remember as much of it as me, I'm sure. But we had a great time. And, that night was... It's the first time I've been to a country where I couldn't depend on being able to read road signs. It never occurred to me that it wasn't even the same alphabet. And so I got horribly lost in Tokyo and had a massive adventure wandering around the place on my day off. Yeah. Everybody was super nice to us. They put flowers in your hotel room with little name cards from your record company.
That's nice, isn't it? I do like that.
One of those the other day.
Oh, really?
And so all the people that I met, we got to play with Psy. They opened for us when we played Tokyo.
That's a great
I never
band.
thought I'd get to see Psy. Yeah. And I really, live, they are so different. Where they do so much of that ostentation, is that the word? With the keyboards. What we saw was the 3-piece Psy, and they were wickedly heavy. They were so heavy. And got to hang out with Mariah a little bit. He was a really nice chap as well. But the show in Osaka was just exceptional, where I think the first day we were there, everybody was, whatever it was, 8-9 hours off whack. And so I think I slept right through soundcheck, and my guitar tech woke me up and pointed out there was a show in 90 minutes. Everybody else had tried to stay awake. Everybody deals with jet lag differently.
Yep.
And they were good. I mean, we played lots of great shows back then. I mean, it sounds terribly arrogant, but there was a time when no other metal band could compete with us live.
I wouldn't disagree.
We were paying attention.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that at all. I think when it all sort of clicked for you guys, there was, particularly in that era there wasn't a lot that could stand next to you. Actually, maybe Morbid Angel. Cannibal Corpse, I think, were doing what they do.
There was one. Keep going, you'll get to it. There was one band where genuinely we played a short tour with them, and we obviously become a little complacent on the first night. Me and Bark had a chance, so they fucking kicked our asses, and we got another 6 nights of this.
Oh, was it? What was it? Death, was it? I mean, Chuck was brilliant. So was it? Did you tour with
Dissection?
Yeah, I've never been a big fan of Dissection. I don't know what it is. It's not because
I love the Storm the Lightsbane record. That was definitive for the Swedish death black sound for me, and I don't think it's ever been equaled. I just think it's an amazing record, and I was thrilled to be touring with them. But we kind of took it for granted that we were headlining, and I think it was 6 nights we got our asses kicked on night 1. We had to call it a draw the next 4. What pushed it over was the last night was being filmed by their record company with all of their staff in attendance, and we made a point of wiping the fucking floor with them.
You had to, yeah.
And there's no disrespect to Dissection. You know, poor old John's no longer with us.
He's gone, yeah. He's gone.
He also had an autistic condition that was never addressed. I'm not on a mission, but there were a lot of guys my age. We went through school and we were just bad kids. It never occurred to people that we might be wired up differently inside. And a lot of guys that I used to hang out with were varying degrees of this. There's one who is utterly deranged, and if his mum had taken him to a hospital earlier, things might have been different for him. It's very strange. Cawthon as well.
Oh, is that right?
I know. Well, I can't prove this, but a couple of guys I knew from Stockholm had met him, and the way they described interacting with him, I said, well, now that I know I'm wired up differently, not better or worse, just different, I can see how that interaction went. And then you listen to his music, and it goes in a different way to anything else Bathory for me. Twilight of the Gods is actually unique in my record collection, that when I remember it, it's utterly different to how it actually manifests on the album. It takes a few seconds to absorb me into it. And I think it's probably, we are wired up in a similar way. His imagination exceeded his skill by thousands of degrees. Yet he still put these amazing records together. They're some of my all-time favourites. You know, and one of my favourite things that happened way back in the 90s was another one of those great days where I was doing something and Nick appeared, very excited, and said, "You've got to come up on deck now." And we're on a ferry from Stockholm to Helsinki, and dragged me up on deck. It's freezing, as you can imagine. But he said, "Look," and it was the islands from the front of Twilight of the Gods. And he had his Walkman, and we had one earphone each, listening to Hammerheart. So that's how it's done.
Of course it is. That's how it's done.
It was a beautiful thing, you know, one of those unique opportunities that we had. Because it never occurred to me where those islands were. But I won't go on about that sort of thing too much. But there are a lot of us wired up differently. You know, it's, everybody's different. And I'm lucky that it's not debilitating for me or for my son. But we do see the world differently. And I think Trey lives somewhere up that, we would say, up the rainbow somewhere. These guys, we have different imaginations and different functions inside.
Well, a bloke I spoke to a few months back now was David Vincent. Obviously, I'm a big fan of Morbid Angel, so I'm a big fan in particular of David and his work. I like his attitude. I think he's a good bloke as well. I think he's.
I've never met him actually.
Look, he's the sort of bloke who doesn't take any shit. There's no doubt about that. You ask him the wrong question, he'll tell you.
I'm sure.
I think he's literally the only person that I've spoken to who's sort of said to me, "Hang on a sec, what are you talking about?" That sort of thing. I've spoken to about 200 musicians and artists at this point. But I made a reference to he's going, okay, outlaw country is the correct terminology, I think. Yeah, but I said your music sounds a bit like Johnny Cash, and I know that's a cliche. He goes, no, I'll stop you there. This American accent that he's got, this deep South American accent that he's got. I don't think it's a cliche at all. But look, he's another bloke who stands within his own truth, and I think he's probably death metal's greatest frontman.
Possibly, yeah.
He's probably, work with me here on this point, he's probably the only rock star in death metal. You know what I mean by when I say rock star, like that genuine David Lee Roth charisma. He's got it.
I think we have to have honourable mention for Jeff from Carcass at this point.
Yes, okay, I forgot about Jeff. Yeah,
He may have been rocking the same lines for the last 20 years, but he is a charismatic bloke. He really is. Yeah, that was a band that I used to go and watch when I was young. Again, a great show that I saw was the Heartwork Tour in a tiny little club. And I think last year I went to see the Revenge of Grime Crusher, or whatever they called it, where however many years later people have realised Heartwork was a masterpiece. I saw them in front of 100 people and then 3,000. And very different, but still great. And Jeff loves it. He just eats up that. The bigger the audience, the more he plays up to it. He's really good with that stuff.
Well, they were a
and he's not a mate. I'm not blowing smoke up anybody's ass. We used to sail over. That's the end of it. I think he's a class act. He's every bit the rock star that Dave Vincent is.
Okay, that's a fair point. Yeah, I personally, there's two bands that are significant that I miss completely, Cancer and Carcass. They're the two bands that I miss completely for whatever reason. It's just, you can't get into all bands, but I've had a moment with just about every death and black metal band out there. Of course, there are some bands like Cradle that live well beyond that and who do make the dice. But, for some reason, Carcass, I just missed it completely.
Yeah.
One of those things.
I think they were a band that my mates were into. Their early grind stuff, it was just there was a spare seat in the car. I'll come to the show with you. But when Heartwork came out, and this is just how I see things, if you're death metal or this metal or that metal or whatever it is, the really great records are just great heavy metal records. They go beyond that. And I think Heartwork is one of those. It's truly, you change one note on that, it can only be for the worst.
That's exactly. I feel the same way about Cruelty. I understand exactly what you're saying there. It's such a good point, and it's something Chuck Schuldini used to talk about. And I only really sort of, I understood what he was saying when I was younger, but I really get what he's saying now that I get older. That whether you listen, I think he's got a famous quote out there. Whether you listen to Death, Venom or Judas Priest, at the end of the day, it's all just metal. Well, when I was talking to Jeff, or sorry, I should call him by his stage name, Mantis in Venom. When I was talking to Mantis in Venom, I said, to me, Venom are just a great rock and roll band, and he couldn't have agreed more with that statement. To me, it's all just rock and roll. I get that it's called heavy metal, and I get even further, it's called black metal or death metal or grindcore or what have you. But to me, guitars, bass, drums, vocalist, it's virtually the same setup as what Chuck Berry was using back in the late 40s or early 50s.
Absolutely it is. It's, like I say, bored teenagers. It'll come out somewhere, and it will have a new name in 2 years, and then another name in 7 years, and on it goes. Like a favourite band of mine growing up was Soundgarden. I never knew they were grunge until maybe the third album they released after I got into them. They were, I thought in my head, a metal band. I saw them on the Louder Than Love tour. And
no, I agree.
So heavy.
I know what I've just said, but to me, they were a metal band. There was nothing grunge about what they were doing. It was bloody heavy.
Yeah, it was fantastic, and a great songwriter as well. That was the real growth that they showed, was they really nailed the songwriting. Stuff like, some friends of mine play in a rock covers band, they still fire out Spoon Man and Rusty Cage now, and people get it. Not everybody knows what it is, but they get that music.
Yeah, the only band that I've noticed has been able to live a life beyond that era, that there's two of them, is in terms of songs like playing in covers bands, and you actually get a reaction from people aged 18, because of course that's the legal drinking age here in Australia, 18 to 50 or 60 or what have you. Nirvana and Stone Temple Pilots. Stone Temple Pilots in particular get a big bang. Creep,
really?
Interstate Love Song.
Never did it for me, Stone Temple Pilots.
Likewise.
Nirvana, as a sort of passerby, I could see why people enjoyed it. I really liked some of the stuff on Bleach. My goth friend had Bleach, the tune called Negative Creep, which I enjoyed, and years later I realised I enjoyed because that's a Black Sabbath riff played at double time. And I remember the news coming on that the poor bugger had killed himself. But never a fan.
Yeah, likewise. Really. No, look, I wasn't a grunge fan. I was already into metal by that stage. So I was already into Iron Maiden and well, in terms of grunge bands or grunge bands that were considered alternative back then that I really got into, there was three. There was Weezer, Faith No More and Primus. But at a stretch, you could call all of them metal at some point, especially Weezer, who were in metal bands. Rivers was in metal bands prior to starting Weezer.
I totally agree, because my friends actually cover... Is it Hash Pipe and
Hash Pipe's Metallic? Yeah,
Buddy Holly.
Buddy Holly, yeah.
And they do, some of the songs I actually don't know. And when I hear the original, they're a really good band. They do their own thing with it, and the heavy grooves they apply. Weezer were one of the bands when I heard the original. I thought that's exactly how they play it live.
Well, there were two albums.
Yeah, so they're sort of Motley Crue through the Looking Glass in a weird way.
I totally agree. It is. It's pop metal, and there were two albums that I spun relentlessly in 1996 and beyond. That was Weezer's Pinkerton and Cradle's Dusk and Her Embrace. I think I had two CDs in my car, my little Suzuki Swift that I used to drive back then. They were the two. And Pinkerton used to match up with what you guys were doing very nicely. That's a brutal album in its own way. It's very angular. If those riffs were, say, condensed a little bit, there's a little bit more palm muting going on, that's a metal album in my view.
Yeah, totally.
Pinkerton?
It's how you want. It's there somewhere if you go looking. It never ceases to amaze me. Here's a new band that I really like. It's the Wolf People. Do you know them?
No, I haven't heard of them. Tell me about them.
I should check it out. There's an album called, it'll come back to me. Somebody says, you got to hear this. There's a movement in Bristol called Beard Rock. I said, what the fuck is Beard Rock? That's got to be worth one go. And I hated it all on this compilation record he gave me, except for this one band. And folksy and fuzzy and heavy by turns. But you'd never say that's a metal band. But it goes in the same way as metal. Steeple is the album to go for. They have 4 albums. There's one that's just collected pre-album demos. Steeple, forget the name of the second and third albums. I didn't listen to them as much. But it's the same kind of heavy that I get from a Great Priest record. But you'd never mistake them for a metal band that don't look like metal. Same as Weezer. The visual trappings aren't there, but the execution is so...
The execution's the same. Yeah, that's right. That's how I feel about it, yeah. I'll check them out. I've just got them up here now. Yeah. So, Steeple...
Silvery Sands is the song to start with.
On Steeple, the 2010 album.
Yeah.
Sounds about right.
I mean, Silvery is a place that I know really well, so I suppose that song caught my ear as soon as he started singing, because he obviously knows the area. It's part of what they call the Avebury line, where Stonehenge and then the Avebury circles are in the west of England. And Silbury is one of the man-made hills from the Iron Age. So, I could sort of see the place as he was singing. But I've followed that band through, and their second and third albums are great, but that one just really hit me. The way one album will stay with you. And I've seen them live a couple of times. They're superb, and they're even heavier when you see them in person.
I think I've always noticed that most bands are heavy when they play live. Even these jangly pop bands have an element of it, don't they? It's unless they're really trying hard not to.
Well, the band that surprised me was years and years ago. Les was doing House for Killswitch Engaged, who are of no interest to me at all. It just didn't do a thing for me. That kind of, was it new metal? Was it post new metal that era?
Post-new metal, I think, is the right way to look at it. Yeah, or metal. Well, it's metalcore, I think. Yeah.
Metalcore, that's the thing I was groping for. But Les mixed it, obviously. Now, Les loves Motorhead. There is no two ways about this. And he applied that kind of wall of noise to Killswitch Engage. But as well, they were doing like the crossed lead guitars of Judas Priest. They're a fucking metal band that some producer has tied up in a different way. To see it live, it was really happening. I bought the album just to make sure I wasn't imagining it, and it's wafer thin. Nothing to it. They were one of the biggest shocks I ever had live. It was them, 36 Crazy Fist, and another band that didn't go on to do much else. But the other bands didn't do it for me, but they were just like our peers. They were obsessed by metal and did it their own way. Never, ever going to listen to it again at home, but live, if they were playing in town, I'd be down there. It's a funny thing, the perception. More and more genres are dictated by record labels and present company fucking know-it-all journalists that need to put something in a box. You know, it's all metal. It really is. I had an interesting conversation with somebody online the other day that doom is not a tempo. You know, it's... And look the word up. Look at the actual linguistic root of doom. It's fate. It's an inevitability. And you can meet that head on, be sad and cry about it. And that gives you the full range of the doom bands. And it's all because one of our new songs goes fast, would you believe? The horror of it all. Up to almost 160 beats a minute. And this guy was quite put out. But he didn't want to talk to me at a show. He wanted to do it online. And he just couldn't see it. But you can call it doom all you want. It's just metal to me. We say doom because it makes our promoter that we used to work for comfortable. He can put it in his box.
That's all about marketing,
but I
isn't it?
reserve the right to be sinister at any speed I like. Because the next record will be grindingly slow and have not quite thrash metal, but some fast up-tempo metal stuff on it as well. Because although you guys haven't heard it yet, I'm not making the same album twice. That was never, ever what I wanted to do. You know, it's just... it's the creative process that I get excited about. Plus, it's a real fluid idea thing that we have going on in Ninepence. Although I always talk about Rob, our bass player, who is also Rob, engages just as much. It's just the simpatico thing we have means we can have an idea and turn it into noise really, really, really quickly. And it surprised us because when we started playing together, we were playing Slayer covers. And for one reason or another, I was morbidly depressed during most of the songwriting for the first album. And it manifests as such. I'm not going to put on a happy face for you. I'm going to tell you what I think, how it is for me. And now I feel better because that situation is over. And it's like having a weight taken off you. Suddenly I feel like scaring the piss out of you at high speed again. So on it goes. It's I've never, ever sat down and said what this should be is. I'm perfectly happy to let the cards fall, see what goes. And I'm sure lots of my favourite bands do the same thing. You know, if you start making creative decisions based, there is a band that I was talking to an insider from, and they're a band that I followed, and they're one of the ones that I think could sell a shit ton of records if they get it right. But he was telling me this guy is now in, their band leader is in a huge state of flux because he doesn't know, or he's not brave enough, that you just do your own thing. That's why people liked your band in the first place, your uniqueness. If you've already got Cruelty and the Beast, why would you want 3 more identical records? You want the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Well, that's what that's what I really enjoyed about From the Cradle to Enslave is that it built on what the platform that you created with Cruelty, but you'd taken it in a different direction, but there was still that DNA there.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the core of it, Cradle to Enslave did exist as a song when Nick was there in a very early stage. And it's one of the great tragedies that he didn't play on it because it was Nick that first riff was quite contentious because it's not a black metal riff. It doesn't sound like anything else. And Nick, one of the few brilliant compliments I got from him over the years was we finished jamming it. And he said, if we don't use that fucking riff, there is something wrong with the world. And that's what pushed it over into being a functioning song. I was battling to get that idea. And a couple of guys still ask me how you play that as well now. Because it's just one of those things, pick up a guitar, make a noise. It stays eccentric and not difficult to manage, but unusual. I've never written anything like it before or since. And I don't need to because it exists. You can go and play that on whenever you like.
Yep.
So, Dark Blood and Fucking is an unusual one as well because, again, that was a fight to get that over. We didn't have a row about it. It was just me and Dan had a disagreement about it. He was off doing his press thing, and I, contrary to what somebody told me, I never fell out with Dan because he went on a quest for celebrity. I actively encouraged it. I thought, what a great idea. Because because of his general behaviour. He would make an unusual celebrity. People would be interested.
Well, I think he went down that pathway, but it didn't turn out too well for him on one occasion. Now, I didn't mention this, and I would never mention it to him in an interview, but there was that famous show that he went on where someone just started taking the piss out of him, and it's on YouTube now, and started calling him...
was that the Never Mind the Buzzcocks?
Yeah, must have been that. That's right, spot on.
The guy that was ripping the piss out of him was a friend of a friend, and I met him. And our friend said, "Oh, well, you've met Dan." And he said, "It's my job." He opened himself up for it. I get paid to be funny. And if I can be funny at an idiot's expense, his words, not mine.
Jesus.
He went for it.
Have you seen that? Have you seen the video?
I've seen a couple of clips. Now, I'm not saying anything for certain, but let's just throw someone up in the air. What if all of Dan's spontaneous comments maybe came from a group effort to write cool and humorous things to say to people in interviews and on TV spots? And maybe those guys weren't there to help him anymore.
Yeah, okay.
So I'm saying nothing. I don't deride anybody. It's all a long time ago. But possibly. Some people are very comfortable working with a front man and are okay with handing over their gags to do that. So,
yep.
But yeah, that Dark Blood and Fucking was a horrendous back and forth. Because he'd been off doing this celebrity thing, he wasn't there in the rehearsal room, so the song had progressed without him. And I think he did a great job of it. I think it came out as a good song. I'd actually forgotten it existed until somebody asked me a question about how it was played. So, there's all these weird artifacts. A time will come statistically that I'll bump into him. And what I don't want is another row. I don't say, well, you said this and I said that. I'm happy to move on. But like I said, unlikely in the extreme. I don't hang out backstage at things. If I get tickets to something, I go and stand in the audience. My friends are there. I'll go and say hello. I could catch up with Barker or Les if they're in town, whatever it is.
So do you get recognised, though? Do you get recognised in, assuming you go to guitar shops to buy strings and all that sort of stuff if you don't buy them online, but do you get recognised by metal fans?
The minority of people recognise me physically, but it's my voice, apparently. Apparently my voice is distinctive.
Okay.
And because I was on a tube train in London a few years back and I was talking to my mate and this guy sort of heaved around with a pin badge on. And so I knew that was you from your voice. But I used to, for whatever reason, maybe I just have an unmemorable face. If I took my makeup off, for the most part, I could walk through the audience at one of our own shows and nobody noticed. So who knows? Who knows? And it's always nice to meet people that do that. Strangely, though, it's all positive now. There was a time when I had to say to a guy in a nightclub in London who had been ever so brave and bounced over to me and said, "Cradle of Filth is shit." And I just had to say, look, mate, if I had a quid for every time somebody did that, I could pay someone to tell you to fuck off. Now, fuck off. So it used to be a negative interaction when I was actually in that band, unless you were at your own shows and there were people that were there to see you.
Isn't that a sad state of affairs, though, for humanity when someone's being creative and playing guitar and have contribute to wonderful albums like you have, and some idiot decides that it's their mission for that moment in their puny existence to come up and offer that kind of feedback, which isn't going to mean anything. See, I've got a bit of a
but I would take as much notice of that as I would about the positive stuff, because you have to, not to take you too far back to Descartes, I can't be certain that I'm perceiving these things correctly, but I know the inside. And so I would go forward that way. I've very rarely read any of our reviews of our albums, because what I didn't want to do was see it through somebody else's eyes. People liked what we did.
Well, I think people missed. I think the thing about Cradle was it was always a fan thing. The critics didn't get Cradle; they never got it. And I remember reading the reviews back in the day, where I think they were trying to say some words to the effect of you should sound more like the Scandinavian bands if you want to play black metal, which is just absurd. Because how do you advance and how do you innovate if you don't add new elements?
Because a couple of lads from up north and a lad from the West Country are going to sound exactly like Scandinavians. We used to joke about that shit. There was a working title for one project. I couldn't tell you what it was, but it was, if you look at a Immortal discography, they released Lizard Beast. And we had a copy of it and we played it, and it was a cool album. And the working title for whatever we were doing next was Drizzle Demons. We don't live in a snowy wasteland. Where I'm from is temperate and it has beautiful beaches, and the biggest city is like 80,000 people for a 2-hour drive to get to a bigger city. That's not how I grew up, and I'm not going to let on. I hate snow. It just didn't happen when I was a kid. It's warmer. I'm from. So what not reading reviews did for me was allow me a sort of freedom for my imagination. Otherwise, and some of the guys did get like this, they would start second guessing their instincts because somebody had said this. Now, most of those guys, the ones that write for the big pro magazines, they have to turn out a shitload of copy, and they might not necessarily have their eye on the ball. There were a couple of guys that I would be interested in personally when I talked to them what their opinion of what we were doing was, because they tell me differently what they'd write. Because there's always an agenda, isn't there, when you're a journalist doing new releases. But
it's changed a bit. I mean, I guess I'm part of the. I would never consider myself part of that. The heavy metal media brigade. But I mean, I interview a plethora. Sorry, there, mate. It just cut out. Can you hear me? Yeah, sorry, it just cut out then.
Yeah, it's where I live. The broadband's good to a point, but there's a pub over the road, and you get so much RF. I guess it's lunchtime when people take all their phones in there, and my phone will be a little bit jippy. Yeah. You tell me if there's any problems, mate.
It's just starting to cut in and out now. That's good. We'll keep on going until we got to stop. But I was just saying that. Look, I've made a very big point. If I don't like an album, I simply don't review it. And a few of my contemporaries that do journalism go, "Oh, that's not real journalism." And I said, "Well, I guess I'm not a real journalist, and I'm not going to heap shit on a band because I don't like what they're doing. I might miss the point in something." I've
done the same thing with my writing, mate. There's a couple of things where I said I'm not reviewing it. The two most common ones are one of my mates in the band, and I can't say good or bad about it without it looking like it reflects on somebody that I know. And the other one is this is dog shit. And on general principle, when somebody said, well, you have to review that one, I told people exactly what I thought of it. He's seen it my way ever since. So won't tell you the band, but I'm sure you can find me on a website howling on this particular band for their juvenilia.
Oh, there are some bands that I think deserve to get fairly negative feedback. And I know I always try to structure feedback as if I was giving honest feedback to the band themselves. They might never read it. I doubt even most bands read the feedback. But most of the feedback that I do give would be like, and I'll mention the band, there's a band called Mantar who I think have got some good ideas, but they don't have a bass player and they sorely miss it. They're basically doing Celtic Frost, but without Martin Eric Aiden's influence. And it actually may help me. I mean, I've loved Celtic Frost for a very long time, for 25 years or so, 20 years or so. I mean, it's one of the first metal bands I ever got into. But I didn't realise how important the plutonium heaviness of Martin Eric Aiden's bass was until I started listening. There's another band called Bolzer or Blotzer who don't have a bass player as well, and they're creating music with these great heavy metal riffs, but there's no bass, and it's missing that dense heaviness that metal absolutely requires. So that's the feedback that I offer.
Bass guitar is massively important. When I started getting into being a sound engineer, it astonished me how much of the massive guitar sounds is really the bass interacting with the guitar.
Yes, yep.
Getting all your soldiers in a line and hitting those down, talking about Morbid Angel. When they stab, everything is in exactly the right place. And if you could mute that bass, it would sound like a fart in the breeze, mate. I know a band around here. They're not metal, but I do like them. They write good songs. And they've no bass player. And they've resorted to backing tracks. When they're a good enough band, they play fairly big shows, that they could have 10 good bass players walk in, and I don't understand why it's not there. They're missing that. I always think of it as glue between the drum kit and the guitars.
Oh, it's necessary.
They're more like a noise rock thing. Should look them up. Auction for the Promise Club. Zoe, the singer, writes really beautiful songs.
Sorry, what's the band called? The Promise Club, is it?
Auction for the Promise Club.
Oh, what a name. Okay, Auction for the Promise Club. Okay, I'll look them up.
Good place to start is a tune called See Through. But they've got nice videos as well. They work really hard. But I've never got a straight answer out of Zoe. Why don't you have a bass player? I know a guy who will, for sensible money, who likes your band, turn out and put bottom end in for you. But who knows? Maybe we're too old and we don't understand that the no bass thing is the future or something like that.
I've never got it. And as I've mentioned a few times, I play both, but I think bass is absolutely essential, but I think a lot of bass players are frustrated guitarists as well, and that plays a big part in it. And I've always found that you can definitely hear the difference between a guitarist playing bass and someone who actually understands that the bass is. I mean, I play 5-string bass and 4-string bass, and there's a platitude of notes and scales and modes there that can be used very effectively if you understand how to do it.
Oh, truly, absolutely. I would never count myself a bass player. I play bass on my own demos. I always get a thrill out of hearing our real bass player play the bass, not play a guitar line on a different instrument. I think it's a hugely underrated skill. I can even tell you what song it was the first time I realised how important bass guitar was in metal. Iron Man. The end of Iron Man, when it picks up, take the bass away from that, it's still a cool riff, but it doesn't have that it's that evilness when I think he lays out a C sharp over the melody. As soon as that went in, because I used to jam with some older guys who knew how the bass part went, suddenly it really sounded like Iron Man. And that was revelation when I was 15, where suddenly the bass player wasn't the guy that had spent all his money on cider and could barely walk in our band. We needed somebody who was paying attention.
So let me ask you this about Black Sabbath. Who's more important, Bill Ward or Geezer Butler, to their sound?
Oh.
Because I've got my theory.
It's not about importance. What I would say, though, is Geezer Butler is an exceptional bass player, and he reacts to drummers very differently. If you listen to how he interacts with Vinny Appice, it's totally different to how he interacts with Bill Ward. So he is reacting to the drummer much, much more so than most metal bass players. Lots of guys will throw him out as an influence, but people that really listen to what he's doing and how he's placing his notes, they're quite rare. So I love Bill Ward's drumming. You know, the crazy Latin break in Supernaut is legendary.
Exactly, yeah.
The slab heaviness that he puts together on stuff like Iron Man or Snowblind. See, Snowblind, that's my all-time favourite guitar solo. And without the bass playing that goes with it, it's less.
Yes.
There's 3 solos. The beautiful melodic one, the first time you hear it. Just occasionally I can talk a student into studying, getting 2 hours off and getting paid for lessons. It's fantastic. So I wouldn't say importance, but I used to go and watch Black Sabbath when they had Cozy Powell and Neil Murray on the Headless Cross tour and stuff like that, because they played in the West Country out in the middle of nowhere. And they were still an amazing band. So Tony Iommi is the keystone for Black Sabbath, because Neil Murray is a great, if very different bass player. He's very 80s rock, kind of static bass playing that he'd do. And it changed the older Sabbath tunes. He played them his way. And Cozy Powell playing the drums, it was definitely Cozy Powell. It was much more slab, where one of the things I love about both the Appice brothers actually is the delicacy and the outrageous heaviness at the same time.
Yeah.
And Bill Ward is just Bill Ward. Some of his drum fills, you think, how the fuck did the band follow you through that, Bill?
Well, I think
it's all there and it's all happening.
Yeah, I think he's as important to Black Sabbath as what Tony Bray's sound is to, Abaddon is to Venom, and without them, they don't sound like that.
He's our Tony, mate. When we used to see him, I would immediately start ripping the piss out of bands who introduced themselves by their stage name. We used to call him our Tony.
I can't do it. Yeah, I mean,
they say that's like a familial thing. So our Tony was somebody that's either a great mate or a member of your family. And so he's always war Tony when I met him, just to do a terrible accent for you. And yes,
he does have that accent, though.
When they have a different drummer, it's very different. And I'm a huge Venom fan. I actually rewatched the live footage from Hammersmith that they had on the Ultimate Revenge video. And I've heard lots of drummers criticise him.
Why? Why would they criticise him for? He's an excellent drummer.
Oh, apparently his kick work is sloppy and this and that. It's the same criticism, actually, people level at Lars Ulrich, who... Without Lars Ulrich, a lot of you guys wouldn't be playing metal anyhow. So if you want to burn your copy of Master of Puppets and say that it had no impact on me, go for your life. But
I've got my
amazing
own
drumming.
Yeah, I've got my own theory on Lars, though. I think he, in all honesty, we might disagree on this point. I think he probably needs to step out. When I saw him live in Brisbane, that was not a good show that he played. And there are so many great. Yeah, well, there's Tim Young playing with David Vincent from Hate Eternal, and he was in the last version of Morbid Angel that had David Vincent. He's now playing with David in I Am Morbid. He could step in and do it, and also the excellent drummer that played on the last Megadeth album from Lamb of God, Chris Adler. Lars, I think what they're doing now, because that last album, I reviewed it and I wasn't too scathing about it again, but God, I've listened to it a couple of times again, and that's a poor album. And a lot of that does come down to the rhythms that Lars is supplying. It's like he's gone backwards to the point where he's only capable of these very simplistic polyrhythms. And I'm not asking Lars to do blast beats. He's never the guy. But I don't look. I mean, there's plenty of live recordings out there, but they seem like as though I think this is the primary reason why Rob can't play that one. I mean, Rob's one of the best bass players that has ever walked the earth, Rob Trujillo. And he has to play extraordinarily simplistically to lock down what Lars is doing. If he does anything busy, it shows up Lars straight away. Now, I'm not an expert. I'm not claiming to be, but that's what I hear. I just think Lars has probably got to step out and become an executive producer. I think the other 3 guys have got it, but don't know about old Lars. But I totally take your point.
I've got to say, I love that last album. One of my very best friends, who is my honorary brother, Steve, if you're listening, he loves Metallica so much, it's untrue. And we used to work together in the guitar workshop. And we had a rule. You don't play AC/DC unless it has Bon Scott on vocals. You don't play Metallica after Justice for All, because it's my fucking shop and I'll come and turn the stereo off. And it was just a little joke. It wasn't that serious. But every time a Metallica record came out, he would be fizzing like a bottle of Bass, as they used to say. And he gets so excited, and he always say to me, listen to this, it's really excellent. I hated it. And the big, was it called Death Magnetic, the supposed return to the 80s sound?
But that was horrible. That was a horrible album.
Yeah, it was really genuinely nasty. But he got suckered into the full box set. Have you ever heard the demos they made for it?
No, I
there's
haven't.
Some fire and fury in there that we didn't get on the album. And I couldn't tell you what the record's called because Steve has played it to me many times. I really like it. It sounds like they're relaxing and just playing music. And to go back to what you're saying about Lars, I think somebody needs to say, no, Lars, it can't be like that. They need a producer with the balls to say no, because we've all seen the footage of his behaviour in the studio. It might be a long time ago, but that kind of everything louder than everything else for the drums helps nobody. You know, if you want to hear a drum solo, we can hear it. You put a drum solo on a record, do it.
Yeah, and I think you've just hit on a really important point.
They're so famous, they just get their own way too much. And it's not unique to those guys. I think there are lots of people that as they gain influence, if somebody had just said, no, you need to do it like this. I've been doing this for a long time. My neck is on the line as producer. It needs to be this. But their latest record, it sounds much more like some guys who play metal, just doing their own thing. Apart from the vocal, I was debating with a couple of guys, would you recognise that as Metallica if it wasn't James Hetfield's voice? It just sounds like some guys having fun. Not life-changing, but it's a good record. I enjoyed it. First one that I've enjoyed since me and Metallica had a messy divorce on the Black Album.
Yeah,
so
there you go. Well, no, that's fair enough.
Master of Puppets is me.
Well, look, likewise, and I've often likened Cradle's Dusk and Her Embrace and Cruelty to Ride the Lightning and Master of Puppets.
Wow.
I certainly think in black metal terms, that's it. I was a massive, I remember in 1998 seeing Metallica when they were doing that acoustic in the Round. I don't know, do you remember when they were doing that, when they were playing?
No, the late 90s, this is not some I was on drugs cliche. We were in our own little bubble. We were really, really busy. And so unless it was something that was right in our path, that somebody had rung up and said, we've got you some passes to go see whatever, we kind of did our own thing. So if we didn't see it at the shows we were playing at festivals, we did play with Metallica back then, but it wasn't acoustic, about 98, I think.
Well, I think
they're so famous, we weren't allowed anywhere near them. They cleared the backstage.
Oh, of course they would, yeah.
But they had Monster Magnet as their support band, and I'm a fan. I just wanted to go and thank Dave Windorf, and I had to wait until he came out of their secure zone into the normal backstage before I could do it.
Gosh, yeah. So, and then I heard Marilyn Manson try to pull something similar on an Ozfest or one of those big, those big festivals in the States where none of this was, and I think it was an interview with Dino from Fear Factory, where he's saying that, and nobody out there quote me here, please, you'll have to find the source, but I think this is what I remember it saying, that Marilyn had set up everything in the backstage so none of the other bands could even look at him a la Bob Dylan style.
I'm going to call bullshit on that because I met Brian a couple of times because that's how he introduced himself.
Oh, is that right? That's good.
The first time we played at Dynamo, I think, maybe the second, we played at Dynamo anyway, and we were the special guests to the Marilyn Manson band. And he was just hanging out with Nick, and Nick said, come and meet Brian. I had no idea who this guy was, and we crossed paths a few times. He's actually really personable. I think possibly his PR guy said, it'd be healthy for the Marilyn Manson cartoon that you put over to the general public if you did a bit of something and looked a bit negative. Because I'll tell you my Marilyn Manson story. They're in the same hotel as us in Osaka. They were playing the night after us, and him and two of the guys from his band were so bored, they were calling the lift up to the top floor and farting in it and letting the lift go and then laughing when somebody got out of it. So doesn't sound like the aloof rock star that you just described to me.
No, it doesn't. But
might be wrong.
There is...
But he was very nice. He was a friendly guy. But there is a definite flick of the switch to be Marilyn Manson pissing into the front row 2 hours later.
Well, there's some very famous footage of him with, for all intents and purposes, what looks like cocaine on stage here in Australia for the Soundwaves Festival. I think he's I don't know whether he had a bad breakup or a divorce, but something happened to him where there's no two ways about it. There's acting as if you're out of it on stage, and then there's really being out of it on stage. And to me, there's no question that he's under the influence of something a lot stronger than alcohol in a few of those Australian gigs that he performed. And look, I get it, boys have got to have their fun and the like, but he's not a boy anymore. He's probably 50, I'd say, isn't he? He's probably at least 45.
I wouldn't like to hazard a guess at that one. But cocaine is a bad drug. It's I am not blameless in this, and it's from experience. I can say that's why do it to yourself. It gives you a high dependency very quickly. It's not even that much fun. It's and it will take its toll on you. It's probably the most common cause of early retirement and death for musicians. It's bad stuff, and that's not a criticism of people who still take it. A lot of my old friends think I'm on some sort of a mission because I haven't done hard drugs in 17 years. So New Year's Eve 99 was the last time. I haven't had a drink in 5. I'm not trying to change all of you. It just agrees with me. And so seeing it from the other side, being able to say thanks but no thanks, because, the circles I move in, you'll see cocaine racking up sometimes. And I can easily say, I look at it and just go, it only leads to trouble. It's not my thing. I like weed. And there's lots of guys who struggle with a weed habit. I use it recreationally like other people have a can of bitter at the end of the day. So I think it's a bad one. Cocaine and heroin cause destruction and chaos.
Well, I think the one that's worse is not worse. Okay, I don't want to say it's worse, but the one that I've personally seen cause a lot of destruction is alcohol.
You're not wrong, mate. You are not wrong.
So I'll go home tonight and have a few bevies because I've had a wonderful discussion with your good self, and I'll finish today on a big high actually, and I like to finish with a beer in those cases there. And I'm by no means an alcoholic. I'm a father of 2 beautiful girls, and I'm happily married. And but as a musician, I've been in bands with people who can't handle their drink. And my very good mate, who was my Irish mate in Sydney, who I went through school with, he's an alcoholic. He will have, and I shit you not, mate, he'll have one drink and he'll turn into an absolute bloody demon. Like, I'm talking fall downstairs demon. And I haven't spoken to him in years because it's not that, I mean, I'd hang out with him at any time, but I don't want to, I've never been the guy that lecture to anybody how to lead your life. You want to get any religion, you want to get any in substance, I don't give a shit. It's on your head, effectively. You know what I mean? I'm one of those blokes who'll let anybody lead their life, but Jesus, having people around the family that could be sort of change and change that much after 1 or 2 drinks, I can't do it in 2017. It's just that simple. I've even kicked a guy out of a band because he used to beat his wife. Well, quite right. People like that deserve kicking out of a fucking sight more than a band. I couldn't do it. And you can't talk to these people, mate.
In my close family, I have seen that behaviour. And it was a position where somebody said, you just go and deal with him, mate. I'll say you're in the pub with me the whole time. He needs putting in a fucking ditch. I feel very strongly about that. Abuse of any kind is wrong. Because the world we live in is, going back to what I was saying about the news, people don't seem to realise that any attempt, whether it's physical or social pressure applied to people to live a certain way through a certain set of conditions is fascism, and it must be stopped. So, yeah, I totally agree with you. I wouldn't deal with that at all. But it's an emotive point for me.
These people have a way of manipulating the situation to turn it around and being about you and not understanding their predicament or what have you. It's like, you aren't listening to me, mate. You're beating your wife. You're drinking and then beating your wife. What do you want me to say to you? I can't help you. There's nothing that I can do or say. My energy is reserved for my family and what I do with my life. That's it. And I'm not a selfish person. I don't want to give you the wrong idea that I'm a selfish person. I'm pretty goddamn far from that.
Didn't you find being a parent gave you a different angle on all these things?
Well, it just meant that I had to be more, I had to refine my focus. You know, that I think that's the way I want to look at it. You know, I've got 2 daughters and, look, whether or not we want to believe that life is different for girls, that it is different for boys, there's no question that, you know, they have a different experience depending on how, you know, when I say different, better or worse. I just wanted to be an example to them when they grow up and, you know, if they decide to get married, you know, what sort of a man they might want to look for or what sort of people or how they want to receive respect from the men that are around them, that sort of thing. And that's why this bloke, I kicked him out of the band and it put me between a rock and a very hard place. And I had to break up the band after a while because I couldn't get a guitarist to replace him. You know?
But there's no band worth being in for having scum on your shoulder when you're working, because if you'd have done it differently, mate, it would always be at the back of your head that you're ostracizing them in some way is a positive thing. It really is.
Agree. Yeah.
Being a parent changed everything for me. Where I have a girl and a boy, and I'm sure your girls are the same. Dad is the biggest rock star in the world. Whatever you do must be the right thing because you're dad. And there's no pressure to do it. It comes easy. But that's the big difference with my two. Is my son, of course, I was a small boy. I can advise him on everything as we go through because my weird memory works that far back. Every interaction that he wants to talk about, I'm happy to talk about. But my daughter, I feel much more that I am, maybe it's just a gender thing, somewhat separated and more on a pedestal to her. Which I've explained that really poorly. But I genuinely feel that little girls react so differently to their dads than little boys. Where when they were both tiny,
context, yeah.
my son would disagree with me and then go to his mum and she would intervene on his behalf. It's the other way around with my daughter. And she'll come to me and I'm so rubbish when she does big blue eyes at me, saying, your mother is right, because I've actually turned to jelly. She's got total power over me. And in that, you realise it goes both ways. It really does for me. And to offer an example and show that you're I'm ashamed that I still smoke in front when my children catch me. And it's a terrible drug. Talking about drugs, that's the worst one. I can shift all the others, but I can't stop that one. Is that in process? Maybe one day. Because when kids are little, they see the smoking kills written on the packaging. My son used to call my cigarettes smoking kills. And I had a fucking good go. I quit for 2 years on that one.
Yeah.
And then stressful events was my excuse for starting again. But, as you get older, you understand yourself better. Every 6 months, I try again, and it gets shorter, longer, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it's the greatest job in the world being a parent. I absolutely love it. I was so nervous before my son was born. And, it's joyous. Because now he's 13, we can hang out and we can do stuff. And he likes a lot of the same things I like. We can go to rock shows. And I will indulge whatever new metal dreck it is that my boy listens to because he loves it. And so we're aiming at his first camping festival next year. Maybe go to Bloodstock or something like that.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah.
Well, it's kind of like when I was 13, I was allowed to go to Monsters of Rock, and much to my mum's horror. But so I got to see who played that year. Oh, it's because Metallica were there. I was desperate to go. Metallica playing two bands off the bottom of the bill for a 45-minute show. First time they brought Jason Newsted over here. And possibly the nearest thing to religious ecstasy I experienced was when I realised it was actually Leper Messiah, the first tune out of the gate.
Oh my God. Fantastic. Yeah, that's probably my favourite Metallica song, actually, yeah.
Oh, it's always going to be secondary, a thing that should not be for me. They never did anything so creepy and atmospheric before or since. I think that's my outstanding song with a mention for Harvester of Sorrow. That's got a similar kind of vibe.
Yes. So, I just can't I love the riffs on And Justice, but because of the production, it's so dry and bone dry, it just doesn't have the legs that the other two have got.
No, and I think that's possibly the point where Metallica had enough influence, they started to get their own way all the time. There was nobody there to say, that's not it.
I developed a theory.
Like live.
I tell you what, I developed a theory about why that album sounds like it does. So bear with me here as I explain. So I've given this a lot of thought, and I've actually written a blog entry that's about 8,000 words about the period of Metallica's career. It covers a little bit of And Justice and Black, but mainly around Load and what happened around Load. Because that album, I don't like the album, but that period of their career fascinates me. Anyway, I digress. My theory about And Justice is that they were so aggrieved by the loss of Cliff Burton that they decided that the follow-up album would have no bass whatsoever. That's what I think has happened. Now, they've never said that.
That's an interesting theory, mate. I never thought of it in those terms.
Because
I think most definitely the contribution of Cliff Burton, because his bass playing was very, for thrash metal, very, very agile, wasn't it? It was much more the Geezer Butler end of things. He was moving against the guitars with the drums and stuff like that.
Well, with the greatest of respect to Cliff and his family and no point saying to his fans, the fans are fans, but to him and his family, I think it's one of those things where since he's died, it's a bit like the Kurt Cobain thing. It just sort of blew up and became a little bit more impressive than what it actually really was in real life. And I shared this story with Tony Dolan from Venom Inc. Tony himself had a big impact on me as a bass player because that was the first time at the beginning of Primeval. Now, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That was the first time I'd really heard prominent bass playing in metal. Now, I know there are other albums out there, but I'm talking about an album that I owned. So I had the Metallica albums at the time, but when I got Primeval, I was like, shit, this guy knows how to play bass. So truth be told, Tony Dolan had more of an impact on me as a bass player than what Cliff did. As I get older, there's no question, and I've certainly heard the isolated bass tracks on YouTube from Puppets, and they sound unbelievable. They sound great, but even with Cliff and the band, they seem to have something against the bass frequency, and they just didn't have him high enough to really hear the wonderful work that he was doing, particularly with his right hand, with that Steve Harris spider-style technique that he had going on.
Yeah. No, I mean, I never got to see Metallica with Cliff Burton, but I've seen, like everybody else, loads of footage of it. And he's obviously a big personality as well. And, the Cliff Moore VHS, that used to travel around all of our friends when we were young. And there was some great live footage of Metallica on there. And, so who knows? But I think possibly Jason Newsted was in there taking instruction from people where Cliff Burton was just Cliff Burton and got on with his bass playing. I'm not saying he's beyond reproach, but I think he was a different part of the band. Jason Newsted he's a great bass player. He did some excellent work because I've got some nice live recordings, bootlegs from Justice for All tour.
I think
and the front of house, you can hear him.
Yeah, he's in particular in that show that I watched in 1998. If it wasn't for Jason, I think that show would have been pretty shitty, to be frank. He did a lot of singing. I remember feeling not sorry for Jason. I don't feel sorry for anybody. You feel sorry for people who got cancer and are victims of things, okay? But I really felt for Jason through the media and the promotional trail for a lot of the album, particularly on Load. He was turning himself inside out, trying to explain why they were still a metal band, or words to the effect, and why Metallica's contribution to rock and metal was important. I don't think he believed a goddamn word of it. You know that? I think he was totally sidelined through that whole period there. That, from his perspective, I'm really happy for him that he played on Load because, on the Black Album, so they can continue to get those publishing checks.
Yeah.
I think that's really it for him. And you see it now to this day. He's still he comes across to me as a very confused bloke. So the most metal member of Metallica probably ever isn't playing metal. He had a stab at it, but he just, he talked about why it was too much to get a band going and the whole machine of trying to get a band on the promotional trail and play festivals and gigs around the world. But he's doing acoustic music again, like what he was not similar, but it's same vibe as what he was doing in that band that he did after, was it Papa Wheelie? Was that the name of the band that he got into straight after he left Metallica?
Nothing at all about his work outside of Metallica and Flotsam and Jetsam before that, of course. So, I say, me and Metallica, we going from my favourite band to, I remember there was the National Rock Show played Enter Sandman on a Friday night. And I went out to our local bar that I keep talking about on a Saturday. Every metalhead had heard it. Most of them had their Walkmans because they'd copied it from the radio so they could hear it again. And everybody was just kind of they were stunned. Maybe 50% of those guys learned to enjoy the new Metallica style. I never recovered from that. So my experience with Metallica sort of stops at Black Album. And then somewhere around 98, we were on the same bill as Metallica. And hand on heart, I was begging them to stop. 3 hours is too much. It was.
Agreed.
And they were playing medleys. One of my personal fucking hates is medleys. If they're really great songs, play the song and we will enjoy it. Don't bowdlerize your own music, you fucking idiots. You've got a 3-hour show. You are Metallica. They will let you play as long as you want to play. That's the way it's bowdlerized, is to like these mini bite-sized versions of cool tracks from And Justice for All that were being run into bits of songs from Master of Puppets. It's not necessary. When you're a fan of a band, you're a fan of a band, and we don't have to agree with everything they do, but at least don't exacerbate the issue by crippling the early stuff that I was still excited about. They were just, there are two things I've seen where I really just wanted it to end. That Metallica show, and a few years before that, Ozzy Osbourne at Monsters of Rock. They weren't bad players, but it's probably like the least gelled band anybody can have. I think it's when he had the dude from Faith No More playing drums.
Mike
and
Borden,
one of those LA session guys on guitar, and he was in physically poor shape. You're just thinking, mate, go and have a lie down. Nobody will think anything the worse of you if you just stop the show now.
Yeah, I totally agree that.
Do Paranoid, go home. It just wasn't happening for whatever reason. And the last time I saw Soundgarden, for different reasons, it wasn't happening in such a way that 90 minutes felt like 90 years. Where you could tell those guys were not getting on. It was really unpleasant.
That wasn't pleasant, was it? Certainly not pleasant to watch that final performance of Chris Cornell's before he killed himself. That's a really hard watch, that one there, because that guy is.
I don't want to see it. That's too tragic for me, because he's such a fantastic vocalist. You know, he's a great songwriter, but his vocal was unique.
Well, I think he had his off nights, though. There's a very famous performance of him playing Saturday Night Live or one of the late shows back in '96 when they released the song Pretty Noose. Anyway, they played the song Pretty Noose, which I love that album. Sorry, the name of that album escapes me at the moment. But
and Down on the Upside.
Down on the Upside, that's the album, yeah.
Or Up on the Downside, I forget. But yeah,
no, you're right, Down on the Upside, yeah. But he played Pretty Noose, which I think is probably their strongest track. I love that one the most, but it's in a register too high for him, and that certainly came across in that performance. I wouldn't suggest Googling it or YouTubing it, but it's certainly out there. But yeah, I think you made a really good point about Ozzy too. I saw him in Brisbane in 2008. And from I think the first song they played was Bark at the Moon, and I'm a massive Jake E. Lee fan, far bigger than I am a Randy Rhoads fan. So I basically count down all of the tracks that I expect to hear from Bark at the Moon and The Ultimate Sin. And Ozzy was a full beat behind the rest of the band during that entire performance. It was sad. It's just, I feel like saying, Sharon, you have enough money. Leave the old bastard be. Just let him sit around, you know, smoking cigars and having the odd beer or what have you, because it's not good. It's a train wreck.
I would say what Ozzy could do with, I'm sure you've noticed over the years, Sharon will take her eye off him for 10 minutes. And in an interview, he'll start saying, what I'd really like to do is make something like sort of Beatles flavoured with psychedelic influences. And obviously somebody clamps down on that and it never happens because that's not as marketable. Where stuff like So Tired is that from Ultimate Sin?
It's from the one prior to that, Bark at the Moon. And I know exactly what you're saying. I've had a discussion with Bob Daisley about this very track, Yeah.
I mean, he's an album with Ozzy Osbourne written on it is going to sell by the truckload, whatever happens. You don't need any more money. Why not just let him have it? I suspect there's a great deal of creativity with Ozzy Osbourne that we will never experience. These guys, they're not going to be here forever. Just get your checkbook out, love. Get him the band that he wants and give him 6 months in the studio just doing his own thing and leave him to it. And I would imagine we will be shocked by what we get, but pleased by the result.
Well, I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear him.
He spent a very long time being Ozzy Osbourne, the front man of this magnificent band of session players that they always put together. I think there's more to him, and there's no evidence of that. You know, it'd be sad if we didn't get to see the whole thing. Like Chris Cornell has left us with not just Soundgarden, but some of his acoustic music is really nice. Some of his solo stuff's great.
Did you get into the Timbaland-produced album of Chris Cornell's?
I don't think I've heard that one.
What year is it?
I'm terrible at listening to new music. What's the album called? It
is called, hang on 2 seconds and I'll Google it. What's his name? Chris Cornell. It copped a lot of heat. It, by all reports, wasn't too bad. But look, when you're the guy who's known for singing Rusty Cage, you know, it's always going to be a bit of a stretch when you come out with something produced by Timbaland, you know. So, God, he's got a massive Wikipedia entry. Jesus. Let's have a look here. Discography. I think it was called Scream. Now,
all right.
It is. Yeah. I'll read this. So it marked a shift from Cornell's previous musical efforts with the exclusion of some guitar and rock elements that were replaced with producer Timbaland's electronic pop soundscapes. So therein you have the reason why people, and a lot of rock fans anyway, didn't quite get into it. But look, no doubt it's probably selling by the truckload these days, as things tend to when people move off this mortal coil. And well, should it too, because he's a very talented guy. And I've never listened to it because I haven't listened to anything that he did post Soundgarden. I didn't even get into Audioslave, to be quite honest with you, because I was never a big Rage Against the Machine fan.
Audioslave didn't do it for me. If Audioslave had Kim Thale playing guitar, I would have been all over that. I really, no disrespect to him, he has a unique style. I don't like Tom Morello's guitar playing.
No, neither do I. Yeah. No,
he's a fairly good sort of art rock experimenter, but his rhythm guitars, they always seem a little bit fluffy and indistinct.
Well, he's trying to play like East Bay Ray.
Nail it.
But I think that's on purpose, though. But I don't think if he really, I don't want to speak for him here, and I've never interviewed him, but I'd love to interview him and go, look, I know you can play because I've seen the way you put your hands and your fingers in live recordings and the like, but shit, dude, your rhythm's out. There's no two ways about it. Is that on purpose, or are you just trying to get away from the metal thing as much as possible? Because at the end of the day, Tom, most of your fans also like metal.
Yeah.
He's a guy that I think could release a heck of a metal album if he really focused.
Yeah. The thing I always had with Rage Against the Machine, and this kind of stopped me getting behind them, was I saw them at a Reading festival in the 90s when they were relatively new. It must have been their first album. Hugely popular. The arena was absolutely jam-packed. And I think maybe 1% of the audience could appreciate the irony of all of you shouting, "Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me," at the same time. Because it's a kind of fascism of its own. I think this, you think this. And so, on general principle, me and my friends said, I'm not joining in. We are actually, we were that Monty Python gag. You're all individuals. So they never hit me right. The whole rap metal crossover thing, I think it's left me utterly cold the whole time.
Well, it's
from the early days to whatever's happening now. I'm sure it's still going on.
Well, watch how quickly a bloke who I've, a bit like your good self, that I've been wanting to interview for many, many years is Trace Bruance from Mr. Bungle, and he also played on that excellent Faith No More album, King for a Day, Fool for a Lifetime.
Is that the same guy? I didn't know it's the same guy. That is a good record.
Yeah, it's a brilliant record, probably my favourite of theirs, actually, and that's a guitar album, no doubt about that. Angel Dust was good, really good, as a matter of fact, but I really loved the groove that they produced on King for a Day. Now, a lot of journalists cotton onto the fact that the guys in Korn and I think Wes Borland from Limp Bizkit were talking about Trace Bruance quite a bit during interviews in the late 90s. He couldn't have distanced himself from that quick enough. And same thing with Mike Patton. Yeah. And they get it as well. They get that music was devoid of a lot of spirit and soul and was really just something that probably it was the last great movement. When I say great movement, you know what I mean? The last marketable movement that occurred, or maybe remember that band Jet, that whole new garage sound? Remember remember that. So maybe it went new metal, maybe it went rap rock, new metal, new garage, and probably the internet just blew everything apart after that. So there's been no legitimate movements that you could call a movement since then.
Well, no, because when we were kids, music moved forward, didn't it? Now you can listen to music from anytime you want. And so I meet 16-year-old guitar students. There's a guy raving about Tool when he's 17 the other day. I said, that's not the band I expected you to say when you said, I really like old heavy metal. And I said, sort of like, what? He said, Tool. Well, cool that you like it, but crazy that you found it. That's not a name you hear very often.
Well,
so I can see with my children, their experience of music is it's all happening simultaneous. Like there is no timeline anymore. That's what the record companies used to do for us, wasn't it? Filter it and allow it to come out in sequence, where the internet has just given us access to so much, for better or worse, that the good songs still float up. But there's very few young guys that I meet that are genre fans. Like I would have been a metalhead. They like music and they recombine it and mix it up into their own thing.
Yeah, which I think is wonderful. Yeah, I think it's a wonderful outcome from that perspective.
Yeah, not being able to see the difference between the Beatles and Pink Floyd and Black Sabbath because there's no timeline anymore of this music is a really powerful thing. There's some interesting stuff happening because of it.
And if there is a genre, when I say genre, if there is a box that those three bands to the mainstream are allocated, it would be classic rock, and that includes the Sex Pistols, unbelievably.
But you know, I discovered a lot of music because of a genre term that Kerrang used to knock about when I was first into metal. So 11 or 12 years old, they used to call Blue Oyster Cult, Black Sabbath, Led Zeppelin, all of the bands of that era, dinosaur rock. I now know they're using it as a pejorative. When I was 11, I thought, dinosaur rock, fuck yeah. And so I'm a Blue Oyster Cult fan because of them misdefining what they thought of it. They were trying to slag them. They made them more interesting. Okay, what does it sound like, this dinosaur rock? And, Don't Fear the Reaper wasn't a radio standard back in the 80s. It is now.
Yeah.
And so I asked the helpful guy at the local record store, and he gave me, what is the album called? It's the one with Veteran of the Psychic Wars on it, which is another song I've threatened to cover as far back as Cradle of Filth. And I was just hooked. And I still couldn't see the dinosaur thing, but it got me listening to this music that was supposed to be dead when I was growing up. It was all about the new thrash metal movement and American glam rock. So I guess I've always been out of sync with it, and seeing other people change as time goes on, I think it appeals to me. There are still genre fans, of course, because there's always the grim black metal dude that turns up to our shows just to be grim, who I've never spoken to because he's too grim.
Yeah.
He's just so fucking full on corpse paint and grim that I've never. He's been to probably the last 5 or 6 shows that we've played in the area.
Oh, so he's a Cradle fan, is he? And he's sort of gotten onto the fact that you've now got a new band.
No, he's too grim for that. He just goes to any metal show because there aren't that many metal shows around here. No, he's cult with a V.
Oh, so he's one of those
guys.
Yeah, I know those guys.
You can. I used to say this to Dan an awful lot. If you can't see the funny side of what you're doing it wrong. It can't possibly be a real 24 hours a day thing. And I don't think he appreciated what I was trying to get over. And we used to meet these black metal fans. There's a guy in Switzerland many years ago, and he just stood in the old black metal 2 crossed devil horns across his chest and stared at me the whole night. And so after 30 minutes, I thought I'm going to make him break that face. And so every time I used to wear picks really badly, I used to play celluloid picks. And so I could do 5 or 6 in a show. And they turn into almost a disc. I'd hook it in my finger, I'd whip it, and I'd hit him in the face with every single one that I wore. And damn him, he didn't break that face once. And I bought him a beer afterwards because I was so fucking impressed. And he was actually a cool guy. He just said, no, that's how I enjoy my black metal. Totally locked, like a statue, staring at me. And, there's actually patches on his forehead where the makeup had come off, or I'd winged him with these picks at point blank range. Because I felt bad. I thought, good on you, mate. You can drink on me for the rest of the night. He didn't even flinch.
Yeah, so you do get your characters.
It takes all sorts, mate. Yeah. Oh, of course you do. I used to meet people that carved their own pentagram into their chest before a show.
God, Jesus Christ.
Yeah. For hygiene reasons alone, if you'd like to step backwards, that would be lovely.
Oh, there's some odd cats out there, aren't there? Yeah. They take it too literally.
Mostly it's cool people. Most people that I used to meet at those shows, they were just metal fans exactly like I was. And I think most of them were relieved when it turned out I was a normal metal fan. I was happy to chat about what was new and what I listened to and all those good things. It was a perk of the job. I got to meet metal fans all around the world and chat. I never wanted any degree of influence over what they thought. It was just a nice thing. But yeah, you always met that one who was called Demogorgon and just razor bladed his own chest before a show. And, we can't be free of blame. We did used to pretend that some of the blood we used was real. It was not. Because real blood actually isn't that colour if you look at it.
Well, I always knew it was. Yeah, I guess I got into the. I've always gotten into the music. You guys could have worn tutus for all I could have given a shit, and it wouldn't have meant too much to me. Maybe not tutus, but you know what my point is. Like the black t-shirts instead of the wonderful get-up that you used to wear, which is all very theatrical and part of the show. And it probably
was also really lightweight. It was practical as well, man. Those cheesecloth shirts, you can wear them in very hot venues. Yes. Where a t-shirt even would be oppressive in. Oh, it was an American show where they were saying it was outside of what is a normal working temperature for human beings because I fainted after the show because of the temperature differential.
Where was that at? Sorry, what gig was that?
Milwaukee Metal Fest one year.
Oh, God, that thing, yeah.
I know there are pictures of it because it was when BC Richard made me my new guitar, and so I trashed the 75 quid junk warlock that I had at the end of the show because I only had one guitar case to take it home in. And so I know there are pictures of it. But yeah, 1 second after coming out, it was a sports hall. Like the tiled changing rooms?
Yeah, yeah.
The difference between the heat of the stage and coming out into the cold, my brain just said, no, mate, you're going on the floor. And I just went. And that was 100 and something on stage, the guy at the venue reckoned. But they don't have health and safety as we would recognise it in the US. And another show in the south of France, it was just obscenely hot, which I did threaten to do the encore without my trousers because it was so hot and then thought better of it. That happened a few times. It's just when it's that hot and you've been working that hard, your brain malfunctions. There's going to be a bad decision. And I depended on people like Les to say, no, trousers on, mate. So, it's a funny world, mate. Look, I really must go. It's been lovely talking to you. I'm not trying to rush off the phone.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say, it's almost 4 hours.
I have to get my daughter from school pretty soon.
Yeah.
And I'm in my 40s now. If I don't walk 5 miles a day, I don't feel myself at all.
Oh, I agree.
So
I'm
going to go for a massive walk and listen to some music. But it's been a thrill talking to you, and all the lovely things you said about me. I can't thank you enough because, honest to goodness, I didn't hear any of them way back.
That's a shame. That's
I can remember. I can count on one hand the times that members of that band said, "Nice guitars." Road crew used to compliment me. Sound guy used to compliment me. It was one of those things,
it's a shame,
and I'm still getting used to it. It absolutely blows my mind that I'm talking about what I did back then now because. There was a time, if you could see it as a timeline, where me and Nick were basically written off as an adjunct to what that band did. I've been told that I was just a session guitar player, according to one biography, which of course is bullshit.
Yeah, of course it's bullshit.
Otherwise, I would have got paid all the time, wouldn't I, instead of having to work for nothing.
Yeah.
On the spec of maybe getting something out of a record company one day.
Well, I think you'll get you.
It's a genuine thrill because, like I said, the big thing is guys like you saying, I'm an influence on your playing. And every person who's ever said that, I just think that is the most beautiful thing because I get my own little paragraph at one of the pages of the How You Play Metal Guitar book.
Well, so you should. Well, so you should, mate. So you should. And look, what I'll do is I'll send you through a link to the show once it's posted. And yeah, mate, if you think of anything between now and then, you haven't said anything controversial, by the way, as far as I'm concerned. If you think of anything now and then you want me to leave out, let me know. But otherwise, I'll leave it unedited and it'll go over 2 episodes.
You edit it and make it as fluid as you like. And I hope everybody enjoys it. The only thing near controversy is I don't know how comfortable Nick would be telling the story of how he made John write a riff. Because as far as he knew,
that's not controversial. Yeah, that's not controversial.
That's funny. I wish I could give you more of the funnies. I really could, but they're not relevant to the band. They were just. That's what happens when you give men in their 20s too much money and free time. So maybe I'll write the book one day, or somebody like yourself can interview us all and put it together.
Maybe I'll do that.
There's more to it than you realise, and I'm actually trying not to laugh now because once I start, Les, I could just say, "The Night in Tokyo." That's one of 100 Les tales that needs telling. Because that was just truly beautiful work from him. He's the man I've seen drunkest and still walking. Unbelievable levels of rock star stupid that we used to get up to. I forget who it was, but the night that I saw Les still moving with that much alcohol in his system, some genius said, "How much does it cost to fill the bath in our hotel room with beer?" And they did.
Oh, shit, really?
Les, I'm not going to tell you that one because possibly there are criminal charges attached to that. Nothing horrendous. But I'll discuss it with Les and maybe he'll tell you some of these stories because despite how it may seem now and despite how badly we all fell out in the end, and it was very sad. It was sad losing Barker. But we could go on. If we had a good core of people that went on. And as you know, the Cradle to Enslave EP is evidence that it worked without Barker, and that's no disrespect to him. I wish he could have played on those tunes because we used to have a fucking good laugh, me and Nick. We really did. And yes, it's not as it appears. We did have a really good time. And for the most part, we used to hang out together. There were some excellent times. Varying degrees of how much of a sense of humour you have renders some of them pathetic in-jokes from 20 years ago. Some of them are genuinely worth hearing. But next time I talk to you, things will be different. But don't be a stranger, mate. It's been nice chatting to you. You're obviously a reasonable man in a mad world.
Yeah. No, thanks, mate. Thanks for the compliment too. Yeah. Well, look, as I say, I look forward to trying to catch up with Les later on in the year, mate. But I'd love to catch up with all three of you. It's going to be very difficult, of course, because we all live in different parts of the world. But I just want to thank you so much for your time, for your candor. And mate, this is going to be a blockbuster episode for the people that listen to the radio show, and I'll also, as I said,
mate, nobody's ever asked me these things. If you need to promote your show, 40-year-old Cradle of Filth fans will be interested because I've never sought the opportunity to do this before, but certainly nobody ever asked me.
Yeah, well,
for many years, it just wasn't even something I wanted to discuss because it was the disappointment of not getting that next album. Because possibly if it had gone that way, everybody would have seen that this is the future: is everybody work on their own stuff and bring it all together. That was all I was looking for.
Yeah.
But if anything changes, you'll hear about it long before me. But like I say, I'd love to revisit Australia. Really would. It's a beautiful country with sensible people in. And my regards to the place. I know it's huge, but I have fond memories of being there. I really, really do.
Oh, we'd love to have you back here sooner rather than later.
This is the other thing I always say about Australia. Growing up in the 80s in the country, the VHS rental shop was crucial to a young man's well-being. And I thought that the car in Mad Max was specially made for that film. If I was fucking richer, I would have bought one of those Holdens and brought it back to Britain. I nearly spat when I saw how many old Holdens there were.
Well, that's a Ford, that one, actually. Yeah, gosh, in Australia. Yeah, it's the red and the blue team. The red team's Holden and the blue team's Ford. Yeah, that's actually a Ford Falcon, yeah.
And I'm a bit of a motorhead as well. And the other thing that I saw was the Australian Capri. I love Capris. They were the coolest car you could buy when I was a kid. But the Australian one came as a V8. They only ever did a V6 in Britain.
That's right. We put V8s in everything. I still drive a Hemi, actually, a Chrysler, a Jeep V8. We love V8s here in Australia. It'll never go out of fashion here, So.
Well, you've got the roads for it, mate. It's not practical owning an Interceptor where I live because it's all back roads.
Well, where I live,
if you look at where I am on a map, there is a long straight road, 40 miles, that joins us to a motorway, and that's the way out. Everything else is rural.
Well, I live in a rural area. Well, not rural, I live next to the beach, actually, probably similar to you, but in a Sunshine Coast. And we, I have to drive between here and the Gold Coast all the time, and a V8's beautiful for me because it just cruises. It just sits there doing it. A 4-cylinder car would be terrible. It would bounce all over the road on our bullshit highways here in Australia that are they're tarred, but there's a lot of potholes and all the rest of them in them.
Wow.
Yeah,
I genuinely considered applying for citizenship for Australia.
Oh, good on you, mate. Yeah, good on you.
Because apparently it's a point system, and because I was in good health and young and had a reasonable education, nothing special. I did actually do the checks, and I got within a couple of points, and the guy said, look, if you go to college for 12 months, you can apply. So, in a parallel universe, but my wife was so hot, I stayed in Britain.
Well, come and visit any time, mate.
I'll be back. It would be a tragedy if I never got to visit again. Because, as I say, I have a great friend in Geelong that I stayed in touch with the whole time. And we haven't seen each other in person since, did you say 97 I was there?
Yep. Yeah, 97, mate. Jesus, that's how long ago it is, yeah.
So if I ever do come, I won't tell him I'm here. I'm going to turn up on his doorstep, tell his wife to make sure he's in and freaking out.
I'm sure I'll have a few cold ones there for you.
I'll make sure, send me an email address or something, because we're going to hire a PR guy for our album. I'll make sure you get a review copy.
Okay, thanks, mate.
Hopefully enjoy it, because I think the 3 songs I sent you, they're literally random ones.
Yep.
We couldn't decide what to use.
I do enjoy it. I'm not just saying that. I do enjoy it, but because I'm a fan, obviously, I enjoy what you do. So look, it's.
But there are some of those harmony guitars on there for you guys. It's just they didn't get on the promo list. So whenever I can make it all happen, because I don't know enough about the world of professional music to say that guy's a good PR. Because my favourite one, she doesn't do it anymore. The girl that used to do Cradle of Filth, she was amazing. That's how we achieved so much in America, is because of her.
Okay.
So. See what happens, and I'll make sure you're on the promo list, because it's 11 songs written over 10 years. It's unlike anything else I've ever done, and it's heavy as fuck, mate. And you need to see it live, realistically. I'd love to bring the band to Australia.
Oh, you'd be... Well, that's something I'm looking at getting into promotion myself, actually, so I've no idea how I'll do it, because I'm effectively a telecommunications account executive who is doing this and trying to make a fist of this in my life post telecommunications account executive, is that with my career. But Ralph Santola said the same. Well, he said something to me. He goes, I want to come over. You bring me over. So, mate, I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind.
Yeah, we'd love to come too. If you can find a place for 9pence, we'll be there.
No worries, mate. All right, well...
Yeah, just for the excuse of visiting again. But we are essentially... Oh, that sounds trite. We are a live band. We love playing live. And it's much more fluid than Cradle of Filth ever could, because there's only 3 of us, and we can make decisions faster on stage about what the next song is. We can change it. But if it goes that way, love to come over. But we're going to look into seriously promoting this album, because I think it's a great record. Totally different to anything else I've ever done, but I'm every bit as chuffed with it.
Yep.
So my regards to Les when you catch up with him. I bet you speak to him before I do. He's so busy these days. I chat to Barker more than him.
All right. Well, look, I'll let him know.
I must fly, and thanks for the time and the compliments. It's genuinely really special for me, because
thank you, mate. Yep.
It's I assumed everybody had forgotten me, and because I'm a Luddite, I didn't go on Facebook until about 4 years ago, and I got so many messages. Are you actual Stuart Anstis? Which I thought was funny. The Stuart Anstis, because I always used to say no. The real one's a clinical psychologist from California. If you Google my name, I'm number 2. But I'll speak to you soon, my friend.
All right, brother. Thank you so much, eh? Talk to you soon.
Yeah. Cheers, buddy.
Thanks, mate. Okay, bye.
Well, there you have it. What did you think? You like that? Plenty of people do. As I said in the introduction, there was a Reddit thread created that mentioned that I talk too much and something about it's worth suffering through that. So I hope you didn't have to suffer through my side of things, but I hope you understand now that you've had a chance to listen to the conversation in full, why I haven't cut it to pieces through an edit, why I've left it intact. I just thought that there is far too much in the way of the dynamic. It's all about the dynamic, I think, and you want to feel that crescendo, the ebb and the flow. It's a 4-hour chat, and if you've gotten this far, you are definitely a fan, and I appreciate it. If you liked what you just heard and you haven't listened to the show before, go across to scarsandguitars.com, because there are over 550 episodes, maybe not like that one. That is a high watermark, that one. that chat with Stuart, but many other conversations. The members of, for example, with the members of Morbid Angel, Cannibal Corpse, Emperor, Immortal. At this point in time, I'm not afraid to say if a band has been around for about 20 years or so and they've had some time in the spotlight, chances are I've managed to interview them. So just go across to scarsandguitars.com or even the Whooshka widget, which is easily found. Just type in Scars and Guitars. I think that might be the first or the second thing that comes up. I'm changing the website. Hopefully by the time you watch this, because I'm doing this narration in June of 2021. Hopefully, if it's in the distant future, I have updated the website, and I'm going to group all of the most important episodes under their referenced bands. So say, for example, Stuart will go underneath Cradle of Filth, as will Nick, Greg Moffat, Lindsay Schoolcraft, and under Morbid Angel, you'll get Eric Rutan. There you go, who did the introduction for me. Forever grateful for that, Eric. You know what I'm saying. Testament. So many great bands, members of bands that I've interviewed. Go and check them all out. So please like, subscribe, and all of that sort of stuff. It does help, believe me. Leave a comment too. Leaving a comment is actually more important and affects me more positively. Is that the right way to describe it? Whatever. You know what I'm saying. It gives me greater benefits if you comment. There you go. That sounds better. My name's Andrew Mackay-Smith. I'm the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast series. Thanks so much for listening and watching.